The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and life. For thousands of generations, the Jedi have served as guardians of this cosmic balance, interpreting the will of the Force and maintaining peace. But the Force is not omniscient. It cannot see beyond the boundaries of the galaxy itself, cannot sense what lurks in the infinite void between spiral arms where light has never touched and life has never flourished. Dark space. Empty space. Dead space. And from that darkness, something ancient was coming, something that existed outside the Force's awareness, beyond its light and shadow, neither living nor dead in any way the Jedi could comprehend. The anomaly first appeared on the edge of the outer rim, far beyond the known hyperspace lanes where only the most desperate smugglers and foolhardy explorers ventured. A tear in real space itself, bleeding crimson and black, pulsing with energy signatures that defied every known law of physics. Republic monitoring stations detected it immediately, a spatial distortion of unprecedented magnitude, registering on gravitational sensors across 3 sectors. The readings made no sense. Mass signatures that shouldn't exist. Energy outputs that violated thermodynamic principles. And beneath it all, a signal. Repeating. Mathematical. Purposeful. The Clone Wars had raged for 2 years, tearing the galaxy apart as the Galactic Republic struggled against the Separatist alliance. Jedi Knights had become generals, leading clone armies across 1,000 battlefields while the Senate fractured under the weight of political maneuvering and corruption. The Jedi Order was stretched thin, its members scattered across the galaxy, facing threats on every front. Count Dooku's separatist forces grew bolder with each victory, and Supreme Chancellor Palpatine wielded emergency powers that expanded with each passing month. The galaxy was already bleeding. It was not prepared for what came next. On Coruscant, the galactic capital, the Jedi Temple stood as it had for millennia, a beacon of light and knowledge, its 5 spires reaching toward the sky. Within its meditation chambers, Master Yoda sat in silence, his ancient eyes closed as he reached out through the Force. For weeks, he had sensed something wrong, a disturbance that gnawed at the edges of his perception like a shadow that couldn't be seen directly. Other Jedi had reported similar feelings. Master Windu spoke of a blindness in the Force. Master Plo Koon described a silence where there should be life. Something was coming, but the Force could not show them what. In the Senate building, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine listened to the reports with careful attention, his expression grave and concerned. The spatial anomaly had appeared in the Quilii sector, dangerously close to several minor Republic worlds. The Senate Intelligence Committee recommended immediate investigation, and Admiral Wolf Yularen had already assembled a task force to investigate. 3 Venator-class Star Destroyers, accompanied by support frigates and a complement of ARC-170 fighters. A standard exploratory force, sufficient for initial reconnaissance and defense against potential separatist ambush. Palpatine approved the mission with solemn authority, his voice carrying the weight of leadership that had earned him unprecedented support among the Senate. "We must know what threatens our Republic," he declared. "May the Force be with our brave soldiers." The task force arrived at the anomaly 3 days later, dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the distortion field. What they found defied description. The tear in space had widened, now spanning thousands of kilometers, its edges crackling with dark energy that seemed to drink in the light of nearby stars. Admiral Yularen stood on the bridge of the Resolute, staring at the sensor displays with growing unease. The mass readings had increased exponentially. Something was coming through. Something massive. "Sir, we're detecting multiple contacts emerging from the anomaly," the sensor officer reported, his voice tight with tension. "Designating as unknowns. Configuration doesn't match any ship in our database, separatist or otherwise." On the main view screen, shapes began to resolve from the crimson darkness. Ships. Enormous ships, their designs utterly alien to anything the Republic had encountered. They moved with terrible purpose, their hulls black and red, bristling with weapons that glowed with malevolent light. The largest vessel dwarfed even the Venator-class destroyers, its form vaguely resembling some immense aquatic predator, all angles and curves that seemed to shift when viewed directly. It rotated slowly as it emerged, revealing a central structure that pulsed with rhythmic light, almost organic, almost alive. "Open hailing frequencies," Yularen ordered. "All channels. Let's see if they're interested in talking." The communication officer worked his controls, broadcasting standard Republic greetings in a dozen languages, followed by mathematical sequences designed for first contact scenarios. The response came not through the communication systems, but directly into the minds of every person aboard the Resolute. A sound that was not a sound. A voice that bypassed ears entirely, resonating in the base of the skull, in the hollow spaces behind the eyes. Deep. Ancient. Inevitable. You exist because we allow it. You will end because we demand it. Every clone trooper on the bridge staggered, hands clutching their helmets. Admiral Yularen felt his knees buckle, a sudden overwhelming pressure bearing down on his thoughts. The ship's Jedi advisor, a Nautolan knight named Preth Jalu, ignited her lightsaber reflexively, the blue blade humming as she extended her senses through the Force. What she found nearly broke her mind. Nothing. The ships registered as nothing in the Force, not dark side corruption, not the emptiness of droids, but something else entirely. A void that pushed back against her perception, an absence that felt like teeth. "Admiral, they're powering weapons," the tactical officer shouted. The largest ship, the one that would later be designated sovereign by Republic intelligence, fired. A single beam of molten metal, accelerated to a fraction of light speed, crossed the distance between vessels in microseconds. The Resolute's shields, designed to withstand turbolaser fire and ion cannon bombardment, offered no resistance. The projectile tore through the port hangar bay like tissue paper, the kinetic impact transferring through the entire ship's superstructure. Bulkheads crumpled. Decks collapsed. Atmosphere vented into space, carrying screaming clone troopers with it. Evasive maneuvers. Return fire. Yularen gripped his command chair as the ship lurched, alarms wailing throughout the bridge. The Venators opened up with their turbolaser batteries, hundreds of green bolts streaking toward the unknown vessels. Some impacted, flaring against shimmering kinetic barriers that absorbed the energy with contemptuous ease. Others missed entirely as the alien ships moved with impossible agility for their size, their trajectories defying standard physics. A second shot from Sovereign struck the frigate Integrity, punching through the ship's reactor core. The explosion lit up the darkness of space, a brief star that consumed 800 lives in an instant. The remaining Republic ships broke formation, trying to gain distance, to regroup, to understand what they were fighting. But the alien vessels pursued with methodical precision, more of them emerging from the anomaly with each passing moment. Dozens. Hundreds. A fleet that had no end. On the Resolute, Jedi Knight Preth Jalu made a decision. She ran to the nearest escape pod bay. Her connection to the Force screaming warnings that death was imminent. "Evacuate the ship," she shouted to the clone troopers in the corridor. "Get to the pods. Now." She reached the bay, sealing herself inside a pod designed for 6, and launched without waiting. As the pod's small engines carried her away from the dying Star Destroyer, she watched through the viewport as Sovereign fired again. The beam caught the Resolute dead center, coring the ship like an apple. Secondary explosions rippled along its length as reactor containment failed. In the silence of her pod, drifting in the darkness between stars, Preth Jalu reached for her communicator with shaking hands. She had to warn the Republic. Had to tell them what was coming. But even as she opened the channel, she felt it, a subtle pressure at the edges of her mind, a whisper that wasn't quite words. The feeling of being watched by something vast and patient. Something that had been doing this for longer than her species had existed. If you want to see more impossible threats challenge the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character or faction you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The message she sent was simple: unknown hostiles. Entire task force destroyed. They're not separatist. They're not anything we've ever seen. They're coming for the Republic. They're coming for all of us. On Coruscant, in the deepest meditation chamber of the Jedi Temple, Master Yoda's eyes snapped open. The Force finally showed him what approached. And for the first time in 800 years, Yoda knew fear. The Jedi Council convened within hours of receiving Knight Preth Jalu's transmission. The circular chamber at the heart of the temple hummed with tension as 12 masters took their seats, their faces grave in the afternoon light streaming through the tall windows. Master Mace Windu stood at the center, his hands clasped behind his back, purple lightsaber hanging from his belt like a promise of violence barely restrained. Around him, holographic projections flickered to life, masters who could not attend in person, fighting battles on distant worlds, their blue-tinged forms crackling with static from the strained communication relays. "Play the transmission again," Windu commanded. The recording of Preth Jalu's message filled the chamber, her voice tight with barely controlled terror. The audio quality was poor, damaged by interference that Republic technicians couldn't explain. Beneath her words, something else could be heard. A low-frequency hum that made several council members wince, a sound that seemed to bypass the ears entirely and resonate directly in the bones. When the message ended, silence dominated the chamber for several heartbeats. 3 Venators, Master Plo Koon said quietly, his mask distorting his voice into something mechanical. Destroyed in minutes. No survivors except one Jedi Knight in an escape pod. The Separatists have never achieved such a devastating strike, not even with General Grievous leading them. Not the Separatists, this is, Yoda spoke from his council seat, his ears drooping with the weight of what he'd sensed. In the Force, I have looked. Darkness I see, yes, but not the darkness we know. Something else. Something, outside. Obi-Wan Kenobi leaned forward, his beard neat despite having arrived directly from the Outer Rim sieges. Outside? Master Yoda, what do you mean? Outside the galaxy? That's impossible. Nothing exists in intergalactic space. No hyperlanes, no habitable systems, no. Possible, it is. When see it with our own eyes, we do, Yoda interrupted, his jimmer stick tapping against the floor. Blind, the Force has made us. See these ships before they arrived, we could not. Feel them now, we cannot. As if exist in the Force, they do not. Shak Ti's voice joined from her hologram, transmitting from Kamino. I've reviewed the sensor logs that Knight Jalu's escape pod recorded. The energy signatures from these vessels don't match any known technology. Their weapons aren't plasma-based like our turbolasers or the Separatist cannons. Kinetic accelerators, firing solid projectiles at relativistic speeds. The impact force alone, she paused, choosing her words carefully. One shot from their main cannon carries more kinetic energy than a capital ship's entire reactor output. And their defenses? Windu asked. Kinetic barriers of some kind. Different from particle shields. They don't stop energy weapons effectively, but they absorb and disperse kinetic impacts. Our turbolaser fire barely scratched them. Shak Ti's hologram flickered. Masters, these ships weren't built by any civilization in this galaxy. The design philosophy is completely alien. They're not optimized for the kind of warfare we practice. Ki-Adi-Mundi spoke, his tall head tilting thoughtfully. Then we must consider the possibility of an extragalactic invasion force. A civilization from beyond our galaxy, entering through this spatial anomaly. But why now? And why here? In the Senate building, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine received his own briefing from the Republic Strategic Command. Admiral Yularen's task force had been obliterated, and the spatial anomaly continued to expand. More unknown vessels were emerging by the hour, and their trajectory suggested they were moving deeper into Republic space. Palpatine listened with his characteristic expression of concerned gravitas, his aged hands folded on his desk as military advisors delivered increasingly dire projections. How long until they reach inhabited systems? Palpatine asked quietly. At their current speed, 18 hours, Admiral Tarkin replied, his voice crisp and cold. He stood ramrod straight, his uniform immaculate despite the crisis. The Queelii system will be their first target if they maintain course. Population, 3 million. Limited defensive capabilities. We have 2 Acclamator-class transports in the region, but they're troop carriers, not warships. Evacuate the system, Palpatine ordered. Immediately. And I want every available ship reassigned to form a defensive perimeter. If these invaders want to enter Republic space, they'll find we're not so easily conquered. Chancellor, with respect, we're already stretched thin fighting the Separatists, Tarkin said. Redeploying our fleets to face this new threat will leave entire sectors vulnerable to Dooku's forces. Palpatine's expression hardened, his eyes flashing with something that might have been anger or might have been calculation. Then we make a choice, Admiral. Fight on 2 fronts and risk losing both, or prioritize the greater threat. These unknown invaders destroyed 3-star destroyers in minutes. Until we understand what we're facing, they are the greater threat. But even as Palpatine spoke, he reached out through the dark side of the Force, extending his senses toward the anomaly far beyond the outer rim. What he found disturbed him in ways he would never show his subordinates. The ships were there, massive, powerful, deadly, but in the Force, they barely registered. Not like droids, which were simply empty of life. These vessels felt wrong, as if they existed partially outside of reality itself. And beneath that wrongness, he sensed something that made even Darth Sidious pause, intelligence. Ancient, patient, and utterly inhuman. This was not part of the plan. The Clone Wars were supposed to weaken the Republic and the Jedi, paving the way for his empire. But this could destroy everything before he was ready. On Sereno, Count Dooku meditated in his private chambers, an elegant room filled with ancient Sith artifacts and forbidden knowledge. The hologram of Darth Sidious materialized before him, cloaked and hooded as always. Dooku bowed respectfully, though his aristocratic features showed confusion. My master, I have heard reports of Republic losses in the Outer Rim. Is this one of our operations? I was not informed. It is not ours, Sidious interrupted, his voice carrying an edge that Dooku rarely heard. Something has entered the galaxy. Something dangerous. You will investigate, my apprentice. Take General Grievous and a fleet. I want to know what these invaders are and what they want. Dooku straightened, his elegant beard unable to hide his surprise. You want the Separatists to investigate a threat to the Republic? Master, surely this is an opportunity. While they're distracted. Do not presume to understand the situation, Sidious snapped. These invaders are a threat to everything, Republic, Separatist, Jedi, and Sith alike. If they are what I suspect, then our war becomes meaningless. The galaxy itself hangs in the balance. Now go. And Dooku, the hooded figure leaned forward slightly. Be careful. These beings are dangerous in ways you cannot imagine. The hologram vanished, leaving Dooku alone with his thoughts and a growing sense of unease. In all his years serving Sidious, he had never heard his master sound uncertain. Whatever had arrived, it had changed the game entirely. Knight Preth Jalu's escape pod was recovered by a Republic patrol ship 37 hours after the battle. The Nautolan Jedi was still alive, still conscious, but the medical droids who examined her found something disturbing. Her neural patterns were irregular, showing signs of external manipulation that didn't match any known technology. When she spoke, her words sometimes didn't quite match the movement of her mouth. When asked what happened, she described the battle clearly, too clearly, with details that should have been impossible for her to know from inside an escape pod. They're coming, she said to the clone medics, her large black eyes unfocused. They've done this before. Thousands of times. Millions of years. They harvest. They preserve. They ascend. It's beautiful, really. You'll understand when you see it. When you join them. When you become part of something greater than your fleeting organic existence. The medical droid paused in its examination. Night Jalu, you're not making sense. You need to rest. I see so clearly now, she continued, her voice taking on a dreamy quality. The chaos of the galaxy. The waste. The conflict. The Reapers will bring order. They will bring perfection. They will bring. The Jedi Knight's eyes suddenly focused, and she gasped, her hands flying to her head. No. No, get out of my head. I didn't. I wouldn't. Tears streamed down her face as she struggled against something invisible, something that had rooted itself deep in her mind during those hours drifting alone in space, exposed to Sovereign's attention. Please, you have to kill me. I can't. I can feel them. They're in my thoughts. They're changing me. Please. The medical droid sedated her immediately, but the damage was done. The report reached the Jedi Council within hours. Their only survivor from first contact was compromised. And if the invaders could corrupt a Jedi Knight's mind without even being physically present, what hope did anyone else have? Master Windu read the medical report 3 times, his jaw tightening with each pass. We need to quarantine her. Immediately. No one sees her without council approval. More than that, we need, Yoda said quietly. Understand this enemy, we must. But careful, we must also be. Into our minds, they can reach. Trust ourselves, can we? The ancient master looked around the council chamber, meeting each member's eyes in turn. Trust each other, can we? The question hung in the air, poisonous and necessary. If the invaders could corrupt Jedi from a distance, then anyone could be compromised. Anyone could be feeding information to the enemy. Anyone could be a traitor without even knowing it. The first contact catastrophe, as it would later be called, had claimed more than 3,000 Republic lives. But it had also claimed something more precious, certainty. The Jedi had always trusted in the Force, trusted in each other, trusted in their ability to sense deception and darkness. Now, for the first time in millennia, they couldn't trust their own perceptions. And in the darkness beyond the outer rim, more Reapers emerged from the crimson tear in space. Hundreds of capital ships, each one a monument to synthetic evolution, each one carrying the harvested essence of extinct civilizations. They moved with terrible purpose toward the Republic's border worlds, broadcasting their message to every ship, every station, every being capable of receiving it. Your civilization will be preserved. Resistance is futile. Evolution through synthesis is inevitable. We are the harbingers of your ascension. The harvest had begun. The Quilii system burned. 3 million souls had called the modest agricultural world home, farmers, traders, families who had never fired a weapon in anger, who knew the Clone Wars only as distant news from the core worlds. They had 18 hours warning. Republic evacuation transports managed to save perhaps 500,000 before the Reapers arrived. The rest were harvested. Master Obi-Wan Kenobi watched the aftermath footage in the Jedi Temple's analysis chamber, his face pale in the flickering light of the holographic display. The recording came from a Republic surveillance drone that had survived in high orbit, its automated systems capturing everything. He watched as massive Reaper ships descended through Quilii's atmosphere, their forms blotting out the sun. He watched as beams of dark energy swept across population centers, not destroying buildings but somehow pulling people toward the ships, hundreds, thousands at a time, their bodies dissolving into streams of light and matter that flowed into the Reaper's collection systems. Stop, Obi-Wan said quietly. The recording froze. What are they doing? Anakin Skywalker stood beside his former master, his mechanical hand clenched into a fist. He'd arrived on Coruscant just hours earlier, recalled from the Outer Rim sieges along with dozens of other Jedi Knights. They're processing them. Breaking them down into raw materials. The preliminary analysis suggests they're extracting genetic information, neural patterns, even memories. Then reconstructing the organic matter into He gestured at the screen, where shapes moved in the streets below the Reaper ships. Those. The things that had once been people of Queelii shambled through the abandoned streets. Husks, the Republic intelligence officers had labeled them. Bodies transformed into something between organic and synthetic, their flesh gray and decaying, their eyes glowing with sickly light. Cybernetic implants jutted from their skin at random angles. And they moved with jerking, unnatural motions, as if the intelligence controlling them didn't quite understand how human bodies were supposed to function. Abominations, Obi-Wan whispered. They're creating abominations. Anakin's jaw tightened. And they're doing it across every world they touch. Rune fell yesterday. Ord Mantell is under attack right now. The pattern is the same, they descend, they harvest the population, they leave behind husks and move on. They're not conquering. They're collecting. In the council chamber, the debate had raged for hours. Master Windu advocated for immediate military response, assemble the entire Republic fleet, coordinate with the Separatists if necessary, and meet the Reapers in decisive battle before they could establish a foothold. Master Ki-Adi-Mundi argued for evacuation and strategic withdrawal, pull back to defensible positions, evacuate threatened systems, and buy time to study the enemy. Master Plo Koon suggested attempting further communication, surely beings intelligent enough to construct such vessels could be reasoned with. But Yoda sat in silence, his eyes closed, reaching through the Force for guidance that would not come. The blindness he'd sensed before the Reaper's arrival had not improved. If anything, it had worsened. The Force showed him futures clouded in darkness, paths that led to extinction, and outcomes too terrible to voice. Every time he tried to sense the Reaper's intentions, he encountered that same void, not the cold emptiness of droids or the hungry darkness of the Sith, but something that felt like staring into a mirror and seeing nothing reflected back. Decided, the council must be, Yoda finally said, opening his eyes. The chamber fell silent. Face this threat, we cannot do alone. Too powerful, the Reapers are. Too vast, their forces. United, the galaxy must stand, or fall separately, it will. You're suggesting we contact the Separatists, Windu said. His tone making it clear what he thought of that idea. Ask Count Dooku for a truce while mysterious invaders threaten us both. Master Yoda, they'll see it as weakness. They'll exploit the situation. Perhaps, Yoda acknowledged. But extinct, neither side can be, if destroy each other, we do, while the Reapers harvest all. A choice, we have not. The Force is clear on this, unite or perish. Before anyone could respond, the chamber doors burst open. 2 clone troopers entered, their blasters raised, escorting a figure in medical restraints. Knight Preth Jallo stumbled between them, her face haggard, her eyes wild. She should have been in the medical ward, sedated and under observation. Masters, forgive the intrusion, one trooper said. She overpowered the medical staff. Said she had to speak to the council immediately. We tried to stop her, but... Let her speak, Yoda commanded, his ears lifting slightly. In the Force, he sensed something around Preth Jallo, a subtle distortion, a wrongness that made his ancient instincts scream warnings. But beneath that, he sensed her genuine consciousness, fighting against something that tried to puppeteer her thoughts. Preth Jallo collapsed to her knees in the center of the chamber, her breathing ragged. When she spoke, her voice shifted between her own and something else, something deeper, more mechanical, overlaid with harmonics that no organic throat should produce. They showed me, she gasped. When I was in the pod. Sovereign, it reached into my mind. I saw. Masters, I saw their history. 50,000 years. They return every 50,000 years. They harvest the advanced civilizations and leave the primitives to rebuild. Cycle after cycle. Extinction after extinction. They've done this hundreds of times. Maybe thousands. They're not invaders. They're farmers, and we're the crop. Why? Obi-Wan demanded, stepping forward. Why harvest civilizations? What purpose does it serve? Preth Jalu's head snapped toward him with unnatural speed, and when she spoke again, it was entirely the other voice, the Reaper voice, resonating with absolute certainty. Organic life is a genetic mutation, an accident. Your evolution is inevitable, but you cannot comprehend the solution. We impose order on the chaos of organic evolution. You exist because we allow it. You will end because we demand it. Your essence will be preserved. You will achieve perfection through synthesis with us. Then Preth Jalu screamed, her own voice returning as she fought against the indoctrination. They're lying. They say they preserve but they destroy. Every species they harvest becomes part of them, processed into new reapers. The ship that spoke to me, Sovereign, it was built from some ancient species, their entire civilization distilled into a single vessel. They're not saving anyone. They're consuming us. Master Windu ignited his lightsaber, the purple blade humming to life. Get her back to medical. Now. Full force suppression field. She's too compromised to. No. Preth Jalu lurched to her feet, her restraint sparking as she channeled the force through them, melting the durasteel. You need to understand. They're already here. Not just in orbit, they're in the Senate, in the military, in the temple. Indoctrination spreads like a virus. Everyone who gets too close to their ships, everyone who listens to their transmissions too long, everyone who, her eyes went vacant, and the Reaper voice returned, colder now, she will be silenced. Resistance only delays the inevitable. Anakin moved without thinking, force pushing the corrupted Jedi Knight against the wall. She crumpled, unconscious, the presence around her flickering like a disturbed hologram before fading. The clone troopers rushed forward, securing her with new restraints while medical droids were summoned. Masters, Anakin said quietly, still staring at Preth Jalu's unconscious form. If what she said is true. If the Reapers can indoctrinate people remotely, then anyone could be compromised. We could be making decisions based on corrupted information. We could have traitors among us who don't even know they're traitors. The implications settled over the council like a shroud. How could they trust their own perceptions when the enemy could alter minds? How could they plan defenses when their strategic meetings might be compromised? How could they lead when every order might be influenced by Reaper manipulation? Test everyone, Windu decided. Every Jedi, every senator, every military officer who's been near Reaper ships or received their transmissions. I want medical scans, force examinations, psychological evaluations. If there's a way to detect indoctrination, we find it. And if we find it? Shock Ti's hologram asked. What then? Can it be reversed? Silence answered her question. No one knew. No one even knew how it worked, much less how to counter it. The Reapers had weaponized the mind itself, turning their victims into unwitting agents of their own species' destruction. On Sereno, Count Dooku's fleet prepared to depart for the Outer Rim. General Grievous stood on the bridge of the Invisible Hand, his mechanical body clicking and whirring as he reviewed tactical data. The cyborg general had fought Jedi, defeated Republic fleets, and conquered entire systems. But even he felt something like unease as he studied the Reaper vessels. They move like nothing I've seen, Grievous growled, his vocabulator distorting his voice into something inhuman. No exhaust signatures. No heat dispersal patterns. Their hulls don't reflect sensor scans correctly. It's as if they're not entirely present in real space. Then we shall see how they handle a more direct approach, Dooku said smoothly, arriving on the bridge in his elegant cape. Our droid armies are immune to whatever mind control they employ. Our ships outnumber their forward elements. We strike hard, we strike fast. And we determine whether these Reapers can be bargained with or must be destroyed. You speak as if we have a choice, Grievous replied. Master Sidious ordered reconnaissance, not engagement. My master wants information. The best information comes from combat. Dooku's hand rested on his lightsaber hilt. Besides, if the Republic is weakened by these invaders, it serves our cause. But if the invaders prove too dangerous, he trailed off, leaving the thought unfinished. The Separatist fleet entered hyperspace, 15 capital ships and hundreds of droid fighters, heading toward the edge of Reaper-controlled space. Dooku meditated in his private quarters during the journey, reaching through the dark side for insight. What he found disturbed him more than he expected. The Reapers registered in the Force as a wound, not darkness like the Sith, but an absence, a place where the Force itself seemed to recoil. It reminded him of stories he'd read in Sith holocrons, ancient warnings about things that existed outside the Force's dominion. He had always dismissed such tales as superstition. Now he wondered if the ancient Sith had been warning future generations about exactly this. Back on Coruscant, Chancellor Palpatine addressed the Senate. The massive chamber was packed with representatives from 1,000 worlds, their floating platforms creating a three-dimensional constellation of political power. His voice carried through the space with practiced authority, his words carefully chosen to inspire both fear and hope. Senators, we face an unprecedented threat. An enemy unlike any our Republic has encountered. They do not seek territory or resources. They seek our very existence, our genetic legacy, our future. They have destroyed entire worlds, harvested millions of our citizens, and demonstrated technology that surpasses our own. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. I am therefore invoking Emergency Amendment 121B. All military forces are to be placed under unified command. All system defense fleets will be integrated into a coordinated response network. And I am authorizing the immediate construction of new capital ships and weapons systems to counter this threat. Senator Bail Organa of Alderaan rose from his platform, his face troubled. Chancellor, with respect, expanding your emergency powers in the middle of a crisis sets a dangerous precedent. How do we know? How do we know we'll survive if we don't? Palpatine interrupted, his voice hardening. Senator, I understand your concerns about executive overreach. But these Reapers have obliterated 3 Republic task forces. They've harvested 6 worlds. They're moving deeper into our territory with every passing day. This is not the time for bureaucratic delays and political posturing. This is the time for action. The Senate erupted in debate, some supporting the Chancellor's measures, others warning against giving any single individual too much power. But in the end, fear won. The amendment passed by a wide margin. Palpatine now controlled not just the Republic's military, but its entire defensive infrastructure. And in the shadows of his private office, Darth Sidious smiled. The Reapers were a threat, yes. But they were also an opportunity. Every crisis that strengthened his grip on power brought him closer to the empire he envisioned. The key would be controlling the narrative, ensuring that he remained the galaxy's savior, even as he maneuvered both sides toward his ultimate goal. The Force had not shown him the Reapers' arrival. But perhaps it had shown him the opportunity they represented. The meeting occurred in the ruins of Raxus Prime, deep in the industrial wastelands where mountains of broken starships formed artificial canyons of rusted metal. It was neutral ground, barely habitable, monitored by neither Republic nor Separatist forces. And remote enough that both sides could plausibly deny the meeting ever happened. Master Mace Windu arrived aboard an unmarked shuttle with 2 Jedi Knights and a squad of elite clone commandos. Count Dooku descended from orbit with General Grievous and a contingent of Magna Guards, their electrostaffs crackling with menacing energy. They met in the shadow of a broken Lucahulk battleship, its massive ring structure half buried in toxic slag. The 2 leaders faced each other across 20 meters of scorched ground, their respective forces arrayed behind them in careful formation. Windu's hand rested near his lightsaber. Dooku's cape billowed in the acrid wind, his posture relaxed but alert. Master Windu, Dooku said with his characteristic aristocratic civility. How unexpected to receive your transmission. The Jedi Council, seeking parley with the Separatist Alliance. I confess, I thought I'd never see the day. Don't flatter yourself, Dooku, Windu replied coldly. This isn't surrender or negotiation. This is survival. The Reapers are a threat to both our factions. Continue this war while they harvest the galaxy, and we all lose. Agreed. Dooku's quick acceptance seemed to surprise Windu. I've engaged them directly. 3 days ago, my fleet encountered a Reaper force near Ord Mantell. We fielded 15 capital ships and over 300 droid fighters. We lost 8 ships before retreating. Their technology is problematic. Windu's expression tightened. Problematic. That's an interesting way to describe genocide. I choose my words carefully, Master Jedi. Their weapons are devastating, yes, but it's their indoctrination that concerns me most. They can corrupt organic minds through proximity alone. My droid armies are immune, but every organic officer, every living crew member who survived the engagement, Dooku paused. I had to execute 11 of my own people who began speaking in that voice, advocating for surrender to the Reapers. Advocating for willing harvest. They believed they were being rational. Behind Windu, Commander Cody shifted uncomfortably. The clone officer had read the reports from Knight Preth Jalu's interrogation. The idea that simply being near Reaper ships could corrupt your thoughts, make you betray your own species willingly, was a horror that no amount of military training could prepare you for. So you understand the stakes, Windu said. These aren't conquerors we can negotiate with or enemies we can defeat through conventional warfare. They're an existential threat. Which is why the Jedi Council is proposing a temporary cessation of hostilities. Not peace, we're not naive enough to think you'd honor that. But a mutual stand down. Redirect our forces to face the Reapers while they're still concentrated in the Outer Rim. If we act now, together, we might contain them. Dooku stroked his beard thoughtfully. And after? Assuming we somehow drive back these Reapers, what then? Do the Jedi expect the Separatist Alliance to simply abandon our grievances against the Republic? The corruption, the corporate exploitation, the Senate's tyranny, none of that changes because an external threat appeared. After, we return to killing each other like civilized beings, Windu said flatly. But there won't be an after, if we don't survive the present. Your choice, Dooku. Unite against extinction or continue your rebellion while the Reapers turn every world into a processing plant. General Grievous stepped forward, his mechanical body towering over both Force users. The Separatist Alliance doesn't take orders from Jedi, he growled. Count Dooku leads our forces, not your corrupt Republic. No one's asking for unified command, Windu replied. Coordinate intelligence. Avoid friendly fire. Focus on the real enemy. That's all we're proposing. Dooku was silent for a long moment, his eyes distant as if listening to a voice only he could hear. In truth, he was reaching through the Force. Seeking guidance from Darth Sidious. But his master's presence was muted. Distant. As if the dark side itself was being disrupted by the Reaper's wrongness. He was on his own for this decision. I will take your proposal to the Separatist Council, Dooku finally said. But understand, Master Windu, I make no promises. Many in our alliance see the Reapers as the Republic's problem. They believe if we fortify our own systems, we can wait out the storm while your precious Republic burns. Then they're fools, Windu said. The Reapers don't care about your political boundaries. They harvest. That's all they do. And when they're done with Republic space, they'll come for you. Perhaps. Dooku turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. My master believes these Reapers are not simply invaders from beyond the galaxy. He believes they're something older. Something that's been here before. You might consult your Jedi archives. Look for records of the Celestials, the Rakata, the civilizations that vanished without explanation. You may find illuminating patterns. With that cryptic suggestion, Dooku departed. His shuttle lifted off, trailing exhaust as it climbed toward orbit. Windu watched him go, his jaw tight with frustration. "Think he'll convince the Separatist Council?" Commander Cody asked. "I think Dooku will do whatever serves his interests," Windu replied. "But he's not stupid. He saw what the Reapers can do. That might be enough." On Coruscant, deep within the restricted sections of the Jedi archives, Jocasta Nu worked through the night. The elderly librarian had served the Order for decades, her knowledge of the archive's contents unmatched by any living Jedi. When Master Windu transmitted Dooku's suggestion, she immediately understood what he was implying. The Celestials. The Architects. The Makers. A dozen names for the ancient species that had shaped the galaxy a million years ago, or so the legends claimed. They had built Centerpoint Station, moved entire star systems, and created hyperspace routes that defied natural explanation. Then they had vanished, leaving behind only ruins and unanswered questions. Jocasta Nu pulled up the oldest records, files that predated the Republic itself. Most were fragmentary, translated from languages so ancient that their grammar was barely understood. But one text, recovered from a Rakaton-mined prison, spoke of the harvesters from the void, beings of metal and malice that appeared every eon to cull the garden of civilization. The description matched the Reapers too closely to be coincidence. She dug deeper, cross-referencing with Sith holocrons that had been confiscated and sealed in the archive's forbidden vaults. The Sith, in their obsession with immortality and power, had researched every legend of ancient civilizations. One holocron, created by Darth Andedu, contained a warning: beware the harvest. When the galaxy grows too proud, too advanced, the Reapers return to reset the cycle. They are neither Sith nor Jedi. They are the universe's immune system, destroying civilizations that threaten to unbalance the cosmic order. Jocasta Nu stared at the holographic text, her blood running cold. If the ancient Sith were right, if the Reapers truly returned cyclically to harvest advanced civilizations, then the galaxy had faced them before. Multiple times. And every previous attempt to resist had failed, otherwise, there would be records of victory, not just warnings. She compiled her findings into a report and sent it directly to the Jedi Council. Then she sat alone in the dark archives, surrounded by the accumulated knowledge of thousands of years, and wondered if any of it would matter. Knowledge couldn't stop kinetic barriers. Philosophy couldn't counter indoctrination. All the wisdom of the Jedi, all the records of fallen civilizations, amounted to nothing more than a warning that they were next. In the industrial sector of Coruscant, Anakin Skywalker walked through a weapons development facility with Padme Amidala at his side. She'd returned from a relief mission to one of the evacuated worlds, her face drawn with exhaustion and horror at what she'd witnessed. Refugees spoke of family members turned into husks, of Reaper ships that sang in frequencies that made you want to surrender, of a hopelessness that spread like plague. "We need better weapons," Anakin said, watching technicians test prototype ion cannons. "Bigger ships. Stronger shields. The Reapers have the advantage in technology, but we have numbers. If we could mass-produce something that could penetrate their kinetic barriers." "Anakin, we're talking about fighting an enemy that harvests civilizations," Padme said quietly. "An enemy that's apparently been doing this for millions of years. How do we fight something like that? How does anyone?" "We don't give up," Anakin replied fiercely. "We find their weakness." "Everything has a weakness, Padme. Even the Reapers. They're machines, incredibly advanced machines, but machines nonetheless. Machines can be destroyed. They're not just machines. That Jedi Knight, the one they corrupted," she said, "each Reaper is built from a harvested species. They're alive in some twisted way. Conscious. And they've been perfecting their harvest for longer than our species has existed." Padme touched his arm. "I'm not saying we surrender. I'm saying we need to be realistic about our chances." Anakin's mechanical hand clenched. "Then we make our own chances. The Jedi Code says there is no death, there is the Force. Well, the Force hasn't stopped the Reapers. So maybe it's time we tried something else. The statement bordered on heresy, and Padme knew Anakin was frustrated enough to mean it. She'd seen him grow increasingly disillusioned with the Jedi Order's restrictions, their endless debates while the galaxy burned. The Reapers had simply crystallized that frustration into something sharper. "What are you suggesting?" she asked carefully. "I'm suggesting we use every weapon we have. Light side, dark side, technology, the Force, Sith artifacts if necessary. The Jedi Council wants to fight with honor, to maintain their principles even while billions die. But principles don't matter if we're extinct." Before Padme could respond, Anakin's comlink chirped. Obi-Wan's voice came through, urgent, "Anakin, return to the temple immediately. We've received a transmission. The Reapers are broadcasting on all frequencies. You need to hear this." They rushed to the temple, finding the council chamber packed with Jedi Knights and Masters, all listening to the holographic display at the center. The image showed Sovereign, the massive Reaper capital ship, hanging in orbit above the burning remains of Rune. And it was speaking, not the threatening declarations they'd heard before, but something different. Something worse. "We are sovereign. We have come to understand your resistance. It is expected. All organic civilizations resist. All believe themselves unique, special, destined to survive where others failed. You are not special. You will not survive. But we offer a choice." The image shifted, showing scenes from harvested worlds. But these weren't the horror shows of husks and destruction. These were different. Cities intact. People walking normally. Technology functioning. An entire world apparently coexisting with Reaper vessels overhead. Submission leads to preservation. Resist, and you are processed into base components. Surrender, and you are preserved in perfection. Your memories, your culture, your genetic legacy, all saved within us, eternal and unchanging. You will achieve immortality through synthesis. This is not death. This is ascension. Anakin felt ice in his veins. The Reapers were offering a choice, fight and be destroyed, or surrender and be absorbed. And they were making it sound like the reasonable option. Master Yoda's ears drooped. Lies, these are. Seductive lies, wrapped in false promises. Trust them, we cannot. But can we prove they're lying? Ki-Adi-Mundi asked. What if they genuinely believe they're preserving civilizations? What if, from their perspective, harvesting is salvation? Does it matter? Windu snapped. They're killing billions. Whether they think it's for our own good is irrelevant. But Anakin could see it in the other Jedi's faces, doubt creeping in, the insidious question taking root, what if the Reapers were right? What if resistance truly was futile? What if the only way to save anything of their civilization was to surrender and hope the Reapers kept their promise? That was the true weapon. Not the kinetic barriers or the devastating main cannons. It was the hopelessness. The slow, creeping realization that they might already be defeated, that perhaps extinction could be survived if they just stopped fighting and accepted the Reapers' version of immortality. Somewhere in the unknown regions of space, Darth Sidious meditated aboard his personal shuttle, hidden from all prying eyes. He reached through the Force, not toward the Reapers, that way led only to the void, but toward the networks of dark side energy that connected him to his agents throughout the galaxy. The Reapers were a problem. But they were also an opportunity. If he could find a way to control them, or failing that, to harness their technology. The power to harvest civilizations. The ability to corrupt minds on a massive scale. Immortality through synthetic preservation. Darth Sidious had spent decades planning his empire. Perhaps it was time to think bigger. To consider not just ruling the galaxy, but reshaping it entirely. The Reapers had shown what was possible when organic life and synthetic perfection merged. The question was, could a Sith Lord learn to harvest the Reapers themselves? The agricultural world of Dantooine had always been peaceful, rolling grasslands dotted with ancient ruins and small settlements, a place where Jedi sometimes sent younglings for their early training away from Coruscant's distractions. Now it was a battlefield. Republic forces had established a defensive perimeter around the planet's small population centers, determined to make the Reapers pay for every meter of ground. If they couldn't stop the harvest, they could at least buy time for evacuations and learn how to fight these invaders more effectively. Admiral Wolf Yularen commanded the defense from orbit aboard a newly commissioned Venator-class star destroyer, the Dauntless. His fleet consisted of 12 capital ships, 3 wings of ARC-170 fighters, and a full corps of clone troopers on the surface. Jedi General Ayla Secura coordinated ground forces, her blue skin and lekku marking her instantly recognizable to the troopers who'd served under her in dozens of campaigns. Reaper vessels entering sensor range, the tactical officer reported. 6 capital ships. Sovereign-class configuration on the lead vessel. Multiple destroyer analogs in support formation. Yularen watched the tactical display, his weathered face impassive. He'd fought at Geonosis, survived Malevolence, and commanded fleets in battles across the Outer Rim. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for what he'd seen in the Reaper combat recordings. Ships that shrugged off turbolaser fire. Weapons that punched through shields as if they weren't there. And that voice, always that damned voice, promising ascension to anyone who stopped fighting. All ships, maintain formation. Fighter wings, stand by for launch on my mark. And someone shut down the open comm channels. I don't want our people hearing whatever the Reapers broadcast. But it was already too late. Sovereign's transmission cut through every frequency, bypassing encrypted channels and filtering directly into the neural implants that clone troopers used for battlefield coordination. The voice resonated not through speakers but through the very equipment designed to keep Republic forces connected. Your defense is admirable. Your tactics are predictable. We have harvested 10,000 civilizations. We have seen every strategy. Every weapon. Every desperate plan. You will fail as they failed. But your sacrifice will be remembered. You will become part of US. Your strength will serve the eternal cycle. On the Dauntless Bridge, 3 clone officers clutched their heads, their discipline cracking as the indoctrination signal wormed into their minds. Yularen saw it immediately, the glazed look in their eyes, the way their hands moved toward control panels with purpose that wasn't their own. Security, restrain those men. Now. Clone commandos moved with practiced efficiency, stunning their brothers before they could sabotage ship systems. But Yularen knew it wouldn't be enough. Every second they remained in proximity to the Reapers increased the risk of indoctrination. How long until the corruption spread through his entire crew? How long until he couldn't trust his own thoughts? All ships, engage at maximum range. Do not, I repeat, do not, close to knife fighting distance. Hit them with everything we have and maintain separation. The Republic fleet opened fire, hundreds of turbolaser bolts streaking across the void. The Reaper's kinetic barriers flared, absorbing most of the impacts, but some shots penetrated, scorching black armor, gouging craters in the synthetic organic hulls. It wasn't much, but it was something. Proof that they could be hurt. Then the Reapers returned fire. Sovereign's main cannon charged with a sound like reality tearing. A deep thrum that somehow transmitted through the vacuum of space. When it fired, the magnetically accelerated slug crossed the distance in microseconds. The Venator-class Resolute, Admiral Yularen's former flagship, now commanded by Captain Drake, never had a chance to evade. The kinetic round punched through the bow shields, through the armor plating, through 300 meters of ship, and out the stern in a straight line of catastrophic destruction. Secondary explosions rippled along the Resolute's length as reactor containment failed. 7,000 clone troopers died in the initial impact. Another 2,000 perished in the subsequent explosions. Evasive pattern Theta. Yularen barked. All ships, random acceleration vectors. Don't give them a predictable target. The Republic fleet scattered, breaking formation to avoid becoming easy prey. But the Reapers adapted instantly, their destroyer analogs moving with impossible agility for vessels their size. They didn't just fly, they seemed to predict where their targets would be, firing at empty space that Republic ships then flew directly into. It was as if the Reapers could see the future, anticipate every maneuver before it happened. On the surface, General Aayla Secura felt the disturbance through the Force as the orbital battle turned against them. She stood atop a ridge overlooking Dantooin's capital city, her lightsaber hanging from her belt, her leku twitching with tension. Behind her, clone troopers dug defensive positions, set up heavy weapons emplacements, and prepared for an enemy they'd never faced before. "General, we're receiving reports from the Dauntless," Commander Bly said, approaching with his datapad. "The fleet's taking heavy losses. Admiral Yularen estimates we have maybe an hour before the Reapers achieve orbital supremacy. Then we make that hour count." Aayla closed her eyes, reaching through the Force to sense what approached. What she found disturbed her deeply. The Reapers registered as a void, yes, but there was something else, a pressure, an intelligence that felt ancient and patient and utterly certain of victory. And beneath that, thousands of voices screaming in harmony, the preserved consciousnesses of harvested species all singing the same song of inevitable doom. She opened her eyes, finding Bly watching her with concern. "Commander, when the Reapers land, your troopers need to maintain distance. Anyone who gets too close to their ships risks indoctrination. We've seen it happen too many times. Better to lose ground than lose minds." "Understood, General. But if they deploy ground forces? Then we fight smart. Target their husks from range, use the Force to disrupt their coordination, and whatever you do, don't let anyone surrender. The Reapers don't take prisoners. They take raw materials." The sky above Dantooin darkened as Reaper ships began their descent. Not sovereign, the massive capital ship remained in orbit, coordinating the harvest, but smaller vessels, each still dwarfing the Republic's largest tanks. They descended on pillars of dark energy, their hulls humming with frequencies that made human teeth ache and caused some clone troopers to vomit inside their helmets. When the first Reaper landed, its impact shook the ground for kilometers. The ship's legs, organic-looking appendages that seemed to grow from its hull, planted themselves deep into Dantooin soil. Then the harvesting began. Beams of sickly yellow light swept across the grasslands, and anyone caught in them simply dissolved. Their bodies breaking down into constituent atoms, streaming toward the Reaper like rivers of light and matter. Screams echoed across the comm channels as civilians caught in the harvesting zones realized what was happening. "All units, open fire," Aayla commanded. Republic artillery opened up, heavy cannons hurling explosive shells at the landed Reaper. Most detonated against kinetic barriers, doing no damage. The Reapers registered as a void, yes, but there was something else, a pressure, an intelligence that felt ancient and patient and utterly certain of victory. And beneath that, thousands of voices screaming in harmony, the preserved consciousnesses of harvested species all singing the same song of inevitable doom. She opened her eyes, finding Bly watching her with concern. "Commander, when the Reapers land, your troopers need to maintain distance. Anyone who gets too close to their ships risks indoctrination. We've seen it happen too many times. Better to lose ground than lose minds." "Understood, General. But if they deploy ground forces? Then we fight smart. Target their husks from range, use the Force to disrupt their coordination, and whatever you do, don't let anyone surrender. The Reapers don't take prisoners. They take raw materials." The sky above Dantooin darkened as Reaper ships began their descent. Not sovereign, the massive capital ship remained in orbit, coordinating the harvest, but smaller vessels, each still dwarfing the Republic's largest tanks. They descended on pillars of dark energy, their hulls humming with frequencies that made human teeth ache and caused some clone troopers to vomit inside their helmets. When the first Reaper landed, its impact shook the ground for kilometers. The ship's legs, organic-looking appendages that seemed to grow from its hull, planted themselves deep into Dantooine soil. Then the harvesting began. Beams of sickly yellow light swept across the grasslands, and anyone caught in them simply dissolved. Their bodies breaking down into constituent atoms, streaming toward the reaper like rivers of light and matter. Screams echoed across the comm channels as civilians caught in the harvesting zones realized what was happening. All units, open fire. Ayla commanded. Republic artillery opened up, heavy cannons hurling explosive shells at the landed reaper. Most detonated against kinetic barriers, doing no damage. 10 more pressed forward. And then she felt it, a presence approaching through the force. Something wrong. Something that made her instincts scream warnings. A new figure emerged from the reaper ship. Tall. Armored in black metal that seemed to absorb light. Moving with purpose and intelligence that the shambling husks lacked. When it spoke, its voice carried Sovereign's harmonics. Jedi. Your connection to this force is interesting. We have encountered similar phenomena in other cycles. Species with latent psychic abilities, believing themselves special. They all fell. You will too. The figure raised its arm, and blue lightning arced from its palm, not force lightning, but something similar, crackling with synthetic power. Ayla barely raised her lightsaber in time, the blade absorbing the energy but the impact still driving her back. This wasn't just a husk. This was something the Reapers had created specifically to counter Force users. In orbit, Admiral Yularen made the hardest decision of his career. His fleet was shattered, 8 ships destroyed, 3 more crippled and retreating. The Reapers had achieved orbital control, and now they were landing en masse across Dantooine's surface. He'd bought 90 minutes. Not the hour he'd hoped for, but 90 minutes during which Republic transports had evacuated a third of the planet's population. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. But it was all they could do. All remaining ships, prepare for hyperspace jump. We're withdrawing to the rally point at Bothui. Sir, General Secura is still on the surface. I know, Yularen said quietly, his voice heavy with the weight of abandoning a Jedi and thousands of clone troopers to their fate. But if we stay, we die. And our deaths won't save anyone. Signal the surface forces to execute Evacuation Protocol 7. Commandeer every ship, every speeder, every vessel that can break orbit. We hold the hyperspace lanes open for exactly 10 minutes. Anyone who makes it to orbit in that window gets picked up. After that, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. On the surface, Ayla Secura fought the Reaper's anti-force weapon with everything she had. Her lightsaber work was flawless, deflecting the synthetic lightning, but she couldn't close the distance. Every time she tried, the thing adapted, changing tactics, forcing her back. And behind it, more husks poured forward, overwhelming her clone troopers through sheer numbers. General, we have evac orders. Commander Bly shouted, his blaster rifle overheating from constant fire. 30 gunships inbound, ETA 2 minutes. We need to fall back to the landing zone. Ayla wanted to argue, wanted to stay and fight, wanted to save everyone. But she could feel it through the force, the certainty of defeat if they remained. Sometimes survival meant retreat. Sometimes wisdom meant knowing when the battle was lost. All units, fighting withdrawal to LZ Gamma. Move. The Republic forces fell back in organized chaos, laying down covering fire as they retreated toward the landing zone where LAAT gunships were already descending. The Reaper forces pursued but didn't press too hard, as if they knew this wasn't a victory, just a delay. As if they had all the time in the world, because they did. They'd been harvesting civilizations for millions of years. What were a few more hours? Ayla was the last to board her gunship, force pushing a cluster of husks away from the ramp as it closed. The craft lifted off under heavy fire, its shields flaring as kinetic rounds impacted the hull. Through the viewport, she watched Dantooine falling to the Reapers, harvesting beams sweeping across cities, Reaper ships settling like predators over their prey, the grasslands that had been so peaceful now burning. The Dauntless and the surviving Republic ships jumped to hyperspace, leaving Dantooine to its fate. In the medical bay, Ayla sat alone. Her hands still shaking from the adrenaline crash. They'd saved maybe 40% of the population. The rest were gone. Processed. Harvested. Turned into materials for new Reapers or husks to serve in the next battle. And the worst part? Dantooine was just one world. The Reapers had hundreds of ships, potentially thousands. They could attack on multiple fronts simultaneously. The Republic couldn't be everywhere at once. The Separatists couldn't either. No one could. Admiral Yularen found her there, his face drawn with exhaustion. General Secura. I'm sorry we couldn't hold longer. You held as long as possible, Ayla replied quietly. We saved who we could save. That's all anyone can do. Is it? Yularen stared at his hands, at the controls that had ordered retreat, that had abandoned a world. How many times can we save, who we can save, before there's no one left to save? How many worlds can we lose before the Republic simply ends? Ayla had no answer. Through the Force, she could sense other Jedi across the galaxy, all of them feeling the same weight, the same impossible burden. They were peacekeepers trained to negotiate and defend. Not soldiers prepared to fight an extinction-level threat. Every battle they won was Pyrrhic. Every world they saved came at the cost of two others falling while their attention was divided. The Reapers weren't just winning through superior technology. They were winning through mathematics. Simple, inevitable mathematics. They had more ships, more resources, and infinite patience. The Republic had courage and determination and the Force itself. But you couldn't stop entropy with courage. You couldn't negotiate with extinction. On Coruscant, Master Yoda meditated alone in the deepest chamber of the temple. He'd lived for 800 years, witnessed countless conflicts, guided the Jedi through the darkest times. But this was different. The Force showed him futures of ash and silence. The Separatist Council convened in their hidden fortress on Utapau, deep within the sinkholes that honeycombed the planet's surface. Representatives from the Trade Federation, the Corporate Alliance, the Techno Union, and a dozen other corporate entities sat in their elevated chambers, their faces, organic and holographic alike, twisted with fear and avarice in equal measure. Count Dooku stood at the center of the circular room, his elegant presence a stark contrast to the panic that permeated the air. The Republic burns, Newt Gunray proclaimed, his Neimoidian accent thick with satisfaction. 17 worlds have fallen to these Reapers in the past week alone. Their fleets are scattered, their Jedi spread thin. This is our opportunity to strike at the core worlds while they're vulnerable. And invite the Reapers' attention upon ourselves. Poggle the Lesser clicked, his Geonosian wings buzzing with agitation. You speak as if these invaders respect our political boundaries. They harvest Republic and Separatist worlds with equal efficiency. Baw's pity fell yesterday, one of our primary droid manufacturing centers. 13 billion units lost. Facilities that took years to construct, gone in hours. Then we build more facilities, what Tumbor of the Techno Union replied, his vocabulator distorting his words into mechanical precision. Further from Reaper incursion zones. We have the resources, the technology. We have nothing if we're harvested. Sandhill of the banking clan interrupted. Count Dooku, you've engaged these Reapers directly. Tell the Council, can they be bargained with? Can we offer them Republic worlds in exchange for sparing our own? The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to Dooku, waiting for his response. The Count's expression remained neutral, but internally he felt disgust at their cowardice. These corporate worms thought they could negotiate with extinction itself, offer up millions of lives as payment for their own survival. It was exactly the kind of thinking that had made the Republic rotten, and now the Separatists mirrored that rot. The Reapers cannot be bargained with, Dooku said coldly. I've attempted communication. They respond with philosophical declarations about ascension and preservation, but their actions are clear. They harvest every advanced civilization they encounter. They don't discriminate based on political allegiance. To them, we're all simply raw materials for their eternal cycle. Then what do you propose? Shumai demanded, her gossamer features pinched with anxiety. We cannot fight them alone. The Republic has the Jedi, has the clone army, has unified command under that fool Palpatine's emergency powers. We're fractured, divided by corporate interests. Which is why I'm proposing we accept the Jedi's offer of temporary truce. Dooku's words landed like a bomb in the chamber. Immediate uproar followed, shouts of betrayal, accusations of cowardice, demands for his removal from leadership. He waited patiently for the noise to subside, his hand resting casually on his lightsaber hilt. When silence finally returned, he continued, the alternative is extinction. Not defeat, extinction. The complete erasure of organic life from this galaxy. I've seen the Reapers harvest firsthand. I've watched worlds die. And I tell you now, we cannot stop them separately. United, we may have a chance. Divided, we have none. And after? Gunray pressed. After we've miraculously defeated these Reapers, what then? The Republic simply forgives our secession. Returns the systems we've liberated. Surrenders to our demands for reform. After, we return to war, Dooku replied. But there will be no after if we don't survive the present. I'm not suggesting peace. I'm suggesting pragmatic cooperation against a mutual threat. Limited intelligence sharing. Coordinated defensive strategies. Nothing more. The debate raged for hours. Some council members saw the logic in Dooku's proposal. Others refused to trust the Republic under any circumstances, convinced this was an elaborate Jedi trick to weaken Separatist defenses. In the end, it was Grievous who broke the deadlock. The cyborg general stormed into the council chamber uninvited, his mechanical body clicking and whirring with barely restrained violence. Enough talk, Grievous growled, his vocabulator making his voice sound like grinding metal. I've lost 12 capital ships to the Reapers. 12 ships that could have been destroying Jedi, conquering Republic worlds, fulfilling our goals. Instead, they're scattered debris orbiting dead worlds while the Reapers move deeper into our territory. Count Dooku is right, we cannot win this war if we're fighting on two fronts. Accept the truce. Kill the Reapers. Then we finish what we started with the Republic. The weight of Grievous' reputation as a military leader carried the argument. The Separatist Council voted narrowly in favor of limited cooperation with the Republic, 6 votes for, 5 against, with multiple abstentions. It wasn't enthusiastic support, but it was enough. Dooku immediately transmitted his acceptance to the Jedi Council. The temporary ceasefire would begin in 72 hours, giving both sides time to inform their forces and establish communication protocols. It was fragile, built on mutual desperation rather than trust. But it was something. On Korriban, in the ancient tombs of the Sith, Darth Sidious performed a ritual that hadn't been attempted in 1,000 years. The Valley of the Dark Lord stretched before him, massive statues of long-dead Sith casting long shadows in the red light of the dying sun. He knelt before the tomb of Darth Bane, the Sith Lord who had established the rule of two, and reached through the dark side for knowledge that predated even that ancient warrior. The Sith holocrons he'd studied spoke of the Reapers, or beings like them, in fragmentary, fearful terms. But one text, recovered from the tomb of Darth Revan, suggested something different. Revan had traveled beyond known space during his time, encountered things that existed outside the Force's dominion. And Revan had returned with knowledge, the Reapers were not invulnerable. They were machines, no matter how advanced. And machines could be corrupted, reprogrammed, controlled. Sidious didn't have Revan's knowledge, that had been lost millennia ago. But he had something else, access to both sides of the Force, an understanding of the cosmic balance that few Jedi or Sith ever achieved. The Reapers existed outside the Force, yes. But perhaps that was their weakness. Perhaps something that existed outside the Force's awareness could be manipulated without the Force detecting the manipulation. It was a dangerous gambit. If he revealed himself too soon, if the Jedi discovered his true identity while the Reapers still threatened the galaxy, his entire plan would collapse. But if he could find a way to control or destroy the Reapers while maintaining his identity as Chancellor Palpatine, he would emerge from this crisis stronger than ever. The hero who saved the galaxy. The leader who deserved absolute power. The dark side showed him possibilities, Reaper technology integrated into Star Destroyers. Indoctrination techniques adapted to create perfect soldiers. The power to harvest worlds, not for the eternal cycle, but for his empire. The Reapers weren't just a threat, they were an opportunity for power beyond anything the Sith had imagined. But first, he needed to understand them. And for that, he needed a specimen. On the remote world of Mustafar, a secret facility operated beneath the lava flows. Officially, it was a separatist mining operation extracting rare minerals from the volcanic crust. In reality, it was a research station funded by Chancellor Palpatine through shell corporations and black budget accounts. The facility's purpose: capture and study Reaper technology. The operation had been underway for 2 weeks, ever since fragments of a destroyed Reaper destroyer had crashed on the outer rim world of Selukami. Republic forces had secured the crash site, but certain pieces had been quietly diverted to Mustafar before official investigation teams arrived. Now those pieces lay in containment fields, studied by scientists who didn't fully understand what they were examining. Dr. Nuvo Vindi, a mad scientist who'd previously developed biological weapons for the Separatists, supervised the research with manic enthusiasm. Fascinating, he muttered, studying the Reaper hull fragment through protective barriers. The material is neither fully organic nor fully synthetic. It's something in between, a perfect fusion. The cellular structure suggests it was grown rather than manufactured, but the integration of synthetic components happens at the molecular level. This isn't cybernetic enhancement. This is genuine synthesis. Can you reproduce it? Palpatine's hologram asked from the secure communication terminal. Perhaps, given time. Years, probably decades. But Chancellor, there's something else. The fragment is still active. Not in any way our instruments can measure, but I swear I can feel it. A presence. An intelligence. It's like the material itself is conscious, aware of being studied. And sometimes, Vindi hesitated, his disturbing enthusiasm faltering for a moment. Sometimes I hear it. A voice. Not through my ears, but inside my head. It tells me things. Beautiful things about ascension and perfection and... Destroy it immediately, Palpatine commanded, his voice cold. All fragments. Incinerate them in the lava flows. No one is to handle Reaper materials without full containment protocols. But Chancellor, the research is too dangerous. The Reaper's indoctrination works through proximity to their technology. Every second you spend near those fragments increases the risk of corruption. Destroy them. That's an order. The hologram vanished, leaving Vindi alone with his specimens. The scientist stared at the Reaper fragments, his mind racing with the possibilities of what could be learned, what could be achieved. The voice in his head whispered sweet promises of knowledge and power. It would be so easy to continue the research, to unlock the secrets of Reaper technology, to become the scientist who changed the galaxy forever. His hand moved toward the containment field controls. Then stopped. No. The Chancellor was right. Vindi had studied enough biological horrors to recognize corruption when he felt it. The voice in his head wasn't his own thoughts. It was something else, something that had been slowly growing stronger since he'd started working with the Reaper materials. With shaking hands, he activated the incineration protocol. The containment fields opened, and mechanical arms lifted the fragments, carrying them to the facility's disposal system. Moments later, they were dropped into Mustafar's lava flows, consumed by heat that could melt Durasteel. The voice in Vindy's head screamed, a sound of rage and frustration that made him collapse to his knees, clutching his skull. Then, gradually, it faded. The presence receded. His thoughts became his own again. He sat on the floor of the laboratory, trembling, realizing how close he'd come to losing himself entirely. The Reapers didn't just corrupt through their ships or their transmissions. Their very substance was infectious, turning anyone who studied them into potential agents of the harvest. On Coruscant, the Jedi Council received Count Dooku's acceptance of the truce. The reaction was mixed, relief that they'd gained a powerful ally, concern that the Separatists might exploit the agreement, and deep-seated unease about working alongside Sith-affiliated forces. Master Windu addressed the Council with characteristic bluntness. This changes nothing about our ultimate goals. The Separatists are still our enemies. Dooku is still a Sith Lord. But right now, the Reapers are the greater threat. We coordinate intelligence, we share tactical information, and we maintain enough trust to fight effectively together. Once the Reapers are dealt with, we return to ending this war properly. And if we cannot deal with the Reapers? Shock Ti's hologram asked quietly. If this alliance proves insufficient? Silence answered her question. No one wanted to voice the obvious answer. If the combined forces of the Republic and Separatists couldn't stop the Reapers, then nothing could. The galaxy would fall, harvested world by world, until organic civilization ceased to exist. Yoda tapped his Jimmer stick against the floor, drawing attention. A third option, there may be. In the archives, Master Nu has found references, ancient, fragmentary, but consistent. The Reapers have come before. Cycles, they call it. Harvest the galaxy, leave, return in 50,000 years. But survived, some civilizations have. Hidden, not fought. Endured the harvest and rebuilt after. You're suggesting we hide? Anakin Skywalker said, his voice incredulous. He'd been recalled from the Outer Rim for this emergency council session. Just abandon the galaxy to the Reapers and hope they leave some of us alive? Suggesting I am that prepare for all outcomes, we must, Yoda clarified. Fight, yes. With everything we have, fight. But also preserve. Jedi knowledge, Republic culture, the wisdom of thousands of years, lose it all, we cannot. If fall we must, then ensure something survives to rebuild. The council debated long into the night, but ultimately approved a contingency plan. Secret archives would be established on remote, uncharted worlds. Jedi holocrons, Republic historical records, technological databases, copies of everything that made their civilization worth preserving. If the Reapers couldn't be stopped, at least their legacy might survive. It was a grim acknowledgement of possible defeat. But it was also realistic. The Reapers had harvested thousands of civilizations over millions of years. The odds of the Republic and Separatists somehow being the ones to finally stop them were not favorable. Commander Cody stood in the barracks of the 212th Attack Battalion, addressing his clone troopers with the honesty they deserved. Around him, identical faces watched with varying expressions, determination, fear, resignation, anger. They were bred for war, trained from birth to follow orders and face death without hesitation. But this was different. This wasn't fighting battle droids or engaging separatist forces. This was fighting for survival against an enemy that turned your brothers into weapons against you. Orders from command, Cody said, his voice steady. Effective immediately, we're coordinating operations with separatist forces. Limited intel sharing, joint defensive strategies. I know what you're thinking, we've been fighting these clankers for 2 years, and now we're supposed to trust them? The answer is no. We don't trust them. But we use them. Because right now, the Reapers are the real enemy. Everything else is secondary. Sir, what about indoctrination? One trooper asked. We've all heard the reports. The Reapers get in your head, make you think you're still fighting for the Republic when you're really serving them. How do we know we haven't been compromised already? It was the question everyone feared asking. Cody met the trooper's eyes directly. We don't. That's the truth. Any of us could be indoctrinated without knowing it. So we stay vigilant. We watch each other. And if you notice a brother acting strange, speaking in that voice, you report it immediately. No shame in it. No betrayal. We're all in this together, and we survive by looking out for each other. The speech wasn't eloquent or inspiring. But it was honest, and that mattered more. The clone troopers nodded, accepting the reality of their situation. The combined fleet assembled at Bothawui, a sight unprecedented in galactic history. Republic Venator-class Star Destroyers floated alongside Separatist Providence-class carriers, their weapons powered down but ready, their crews watching each other with suspicion and desperate hope. Jedi starfighters shared hangar space with Vulture droids. Clone troopers stood in formation opposite battle droids, neither side quite believing they weren't about to start shooting. Admiral Yularen stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, studying the tactical display with General Grievous, a scenario he'd never imagined in his worst nightmares. The cyborg general clicked and wheezed with every movement, his mechanical body a constant reminder of the Separatists' disregard for organic life. Yet here they were, planning a joint operation against an enemy that made their ideological differences seem trivial. The Reapers have established a forward staging area in the Christophsis system, Grievous growled, his vocabulary distorting his voice. 7 capital ships, possibly more in reserve. They're using the planet as a processing center, harvesting the population and converting the infrastructure for their purposes. Intelligence suggests they're building something. A relay. A gateway. We don't know what, but it cannot be allowed to reach completion. Agreed, Yularen said. But a direct assault would be suicide. We've learned that much. The Reapers shrug off our conventional weapons. Their kinetic barriers adapt to whatever we throw at them. We need a different approach. Anakin Skywalker leaned over the tactical display, his mechanical hand tapping coordinates. He'd spent the past week studying every engagement record, every sensor log, every scrap of data on Reaper capabilities. Their barriers are strongest against energy weapons and high-velocity kinetic impacts. But they have to recalibrate for each weapon type. What if we hit them with everything simultaneously? Turbolasers, ion cannons, proton torpedoes, and old-fashioned slug throwers all at once. Force them to choose which threat to prioritize. A barrage approach, Count Dooku mused, his hologram flickering beside the tactical display. He'd refused to attend in person, trust only extended so far. Overwhelming their defensive algorithms through sheer variety. It has merit. But it requires precise coordination. Your forces and ours firing in perfect synchronization. Which means unified command, General Obi-Wan Kenobi added, appearing at Anakin's side. At least for this operation. Can your Separatist forces follow Republic tactical protocols? Grievous' mechanical eyes narrowed dangerously. Can your clone troopers follow Separatist battle strategies without their genetic conditioning making them freeze? The tension in the room spiked. Hands moved toward weapons. For a moment, it seemed the fragile alliance would shatter before the first shot was even fired. Then Master Yoda's voice cut through the hostility, transmitted from the temple on Coruscant. Enough, this bickering is. Children, you sound like. Die, we all will, if cooperate we cannot. Decide now, unified command under Admiral Yularen for Republic forces, General Grievous for Separatist forces. Coordinate your actions, but maintain separate chains of command. Succeed or fail, do so together. The solution was pragmatic if inelegant. Yularen would command Republic elements, Grievous would command Separatist elements, and they'd coordinate through a shared tactical network. It minimized the need for direct cooperation while still allowing synchronized strikes. Not perfect, but workable. The fleet departed Bothui 12 hours later, dropping into hyperspace in the largest combined military operation in galactic history. Over 60 capital ships, 300 starfighters, and support craft carrying enough firepower to level continents. If this didn't work, nothing would. They emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Christophsis system, weapons hot and shields at maximum. The sight that greeted them confirmed their worst fears: the Reapers had been busy. The crystal planet of Christophsis, once a beautiful world of geometric cities and transparent towers, was now partially encased in dark metal. Massive structures grew from the planet's surface like tumors, their architecture organic and wrong, pulsing with the same sickly light that emanated from Reaper ships. And in orbit, the Reaper fleet waited. Not 7 ships, 17. Sovereign hung in the center like a dark god, flanked by destroyer-class vessels and surrounded by smaller craft that resembled nothing so much as mechanical insects. They didn't move to attack. They simply waited, as if the arrival of the combined fleet was expected. Anticipated. Part of the plan. "You have come," Sovereign's voice resonated through every communication system, overriding encryption and filtering into the minds of organic crew members. "We knew you would. All organic civilizations make the same choice. Unite in desperation. Coordinate in fear. Strike with hope. And fail. We have seen this pattern 10,000 times. You are not special. Your unity is meaningless. Your defiance is futile. But we acknowledge your courage. It will be preserved when we harvest you. All ships, open fire," Yularen ordered, his voice cutting through the indoctrination signal. "Execute barrage pattern Omega. Now." The combined fleet erupted in coordinated violence. Republic turbolasers painted space green with plasma bolts. Separatist ion cannons lanced out with blue lightning. Proton torpedoes and concussion missiles streaked toward Reaper positions. And from the oldest ships in the fleet, ancient dreadnoughts that predated modern warfare, came solid slugs fired from magnetic accelerators, mimicking the Reapers' own weapons. For the first time since the invasion began, the Reapers' defenses struggled. Their kinetic barriers flared and sparked, cycling through defensive configurations too slowly to adapt to everything at once. Turbolaser fire burned through weakened barriers. Ion cannons disrupted synthetic systems. Solid projectiles punched through armor that had resisted energy weapons. The Reaper destroyer on the fleet's left flank took catastrophic damage, its hull rupturing as secondary explosions rippled along its length. On the Dauntless bridge, crew members cheered. They were hurting them. Actually hurting them. Then the Reapers adapted. Their return fire was surgical in its precision. Sovereign's main cannon spoke once, and the Republic cruiser Integrity, the same ship that had barely survived the first encounter, exploded in a ball of superheated plasma. The smaller Reaper vessels moved with impossible agility, dodging through the barrage while targeting specific ships. They weren't trying to destroy the entire fleet. They were eliminating key vessels, command ships, carriers, anything that coordinated the attack. "They're targeting our command structure," Obi-Wan realized. "They're trying to decapitate the fleet." Anakin was already moving, running toward the hangar bay. "Then we decapitate theirs. If Sovereign is coordinating their defense, we take it out of the equation." "Anakin, wait," Obi-Wan started, but his former Padawan was already gone, calling back over his shoulder. "I'll need fighter cover. And someone tell Ahsoka to get her squadron in the air." The hangar bay of the Dauntless was controlled chaos. Clone pilots scrambled into ARC-170 fighters while Jedi Knights mounted their personal starfighters. Anakin reached his modified Delta-7B Ethersprite, its yellow and white paint scheme distinctive among the gray military craft. R2-D2 was already in position, whistling urgent warnings about the insanity of what they were about to attempt. "I know it's crazy," Anakin muttered, strapping in and powering up the fighter. "But crazy is all we've got left." He launched into the void, immediately diving into a tight spiral to avoid incoming fire. Around him, the largest space battle in the war's history played out in 3 dimensions, Republic and Separatist ships working in uneasy coordination, Reaper vessels carving through their formations with methodical efficiency. The scale was overwhelming. Hundreds of thousands of lives, all dependent on the outcome of the next few minutes. Anakin reached through the Force, sensing the flow of battle, the trajectories of incoming fire, the patterns in the chaos. The Reapers fought with mathematical precision, but the Force showed him something else. Beneath their calculated strikes, there was arrogance. Confidence born of millions of years of success. They didn't believe anything organic could truly threaten them. Time to prove them wrong. Gold Squadron, form up on me, Ahsoka Tano's voice crackled through the calm. Anakin's Padawan led her squadron of Y-Wings into formation, their ion cannons charged and ready. We're making a run at Sovereign. All power to forward shields. If we die glorious and stupid. That's the spirit, Anakin replied, grinning despite the circumstances. R2, plot the fastest course to Sovereign's main hull. And boost the shields, we're going to be flying through a lot of fire. The astromech droid beeped acknowledgement, and Anakin's fighter accelerated toward the massive Reaper capital ship. Sovereign loomed larger with every second, its hull stretching for kilometers, bristling with weapons that tracked his approach. Every instinct screamed at him to break off, to evade, to survive. But the Force guided his hands, showing him the path between death and death, the narrow corridor where a single fighter might slip through overwhelming defenses. Laser fire crisscrossed his path. He rolled, dove, climbed at angles that would have killed a normal pilot from the G-forces alone. R2, D2 shrieked warnings as near misses scorched their shields. Behind him, 3 fighters from Gold Squadron exploded, good pilots, brave people, gone in instants. But the rest kept formation, kept pushing forward, kept believing they could make a difference. They reached Sovereign's hull, flying so close that the ship's surface filled their entire view. Anakin could see details now, the organic curves, the synthetic patterns, the places where something that might have been flesh merged seamlessly with something that was definitely metal. It was beautiful in a horrifying way, a testament to a perfection that had nothing to do with life as he understood it. Target the main eye, Anakin ordered. That central structure, it's either a sensor cluster or a central processing node. Either way, it's important. Hit it with everything we've got. Gold Squadron opened fire, ion cannons and proton torpedoes converging on the glowing structure at Sovereign Center. The Reaper's point defense systems activated, shooting down most of the torpedoes before they could impact. But some got through. Explosions rippled across Sovereign's hull, and for a moment, just a moment, the massive ship's coordinated fire pattern stuttered. On the Dauntless, sensors registered the disruption. Sovereign's command efficiency just dropped by 17%, the tactical officer reported. The Reaper fleet's coordination is degrading. All ships, concentrate fire on the damaged Reaper vessels, Yularen ordered. Grievous, your forces take the left flank. We'll hammer the right. Push them back toward the planet's gravity well. The battle shifted. With Sovereign momentarily disrupted, the Reaper fleet lost its overwhelming tactical advantage. They were still dangerous, individually, each Reaper ship outclassed anything the Republic or Separatists fielded, but they were no longer fighting as a perfectly synchronized organism. They were fighting as individual vessels. Making split-second decisions without perfect coordination. And that meant they could lose. Count Dooku watched the battle from his command ship, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression thoughtful. Through the Force, he sensed the tide turning. Not decisively, this would still be a costly victory if they achieved victory at all, but turning nonetheless. Skywalker had done something unexpected, something that disrupted the Reaper's calculations. Focus all fire on that destroyer, Dooku ordered, pointing to a Reaper vessel that had been damaged in the initial barrage. Grievous, commit your droid bombers. Overwhelm its defenses. Thousands of droid fighters swarmed the wounded Reaper like mechanical piranhas. Most were destroyed by point defense fire, but enough got through to deliver their payloads. Explosions blossomed across the Reaper's hull, and then something critical failed. The ship listed, its kinetic barriers flickering and dying, and then it simply came apart. Not a dramatic explosion, but a structural collapse, the vessel breaking into massive chunks that tumbled toward Christophsis's atmosphere. 1 Reaper down. 16 to go. But Sovereign was recovering. Anakin could feel it through the Force, the massive ship system stabilizing, its coordination protocols re-establishing. Whatever damage they'd done wasn't permanent. In moments, the Reapers would return to their full efficiency, and the brief advantage would vanish. All fighters, break off, Anakin ordered. Get clear of Sovereign before. The beam caught Gold 7 dead center, the Y-wing disintegrating before the pilot could even scream. Sovereign's main cannon had reacquired targeting solutions, and now it swept across the fighters still near its hull like a farmer scything wheat. 3 more fighters gone. 5. 7. Ahsoka's voice shouted orders, trying to coordinate an escape, but there was nowhere to go that wasn't covered by Reaper fire. Anakin made a decision. He could feel it in the Force, the moment where everything balanced on a knife's edge. He could save his pilots by drawing Sovereign's fire. The ship seemed to recognize him, to sense through whatever sensors it possessed that he was important, that killing him would demoralize the attackers. He dove directly toward Sovereign's central eye, all power to engines, R2-D2 screaming objections the entire way. Every weapon on the massive ship swiveled to track him. He was going to die. The math was simple. But if his death bought the others time to escape, bought the fleet a few more seconds to damage the Reapers while they were focused on him, it was worth it. The Force showed him his death. Multiple timelines, all converging on this moment. Laser fire finding his fighter. An explosion. The brief sensation of becoming one with the Force. It was almost peaceful. Then someone else altered the timeline. A Separatist cruiser, the Lucrehulk-class battleship Gaping Maw, broke formation and thrust directly between Anakin's fighter and Sovereign. The massive ship took the full brunt of the Reaper's fire, its shields collapsing, armor vaporizing, but buying precious seconds. The cruiser's commander, a Neimoidian named D.O.D. Callan, transmitted one final message before his ship disintegrated, for the future, whoever's future that may be. Anakin pulled up hard, his fighter's hull groaning from the stress, R2-D2 systems overloading from the maneuver. But they made it. They cleared Sovereign's kill zone just as the cruiser exploded, the shockwave propelling them away from the Reaper capital ship. He'd survived. Against all odds, because a Separatist, an enemy, had sacrificed his ship and crew to save him. The battle raged for another hour. 2 more Reapers were destroyed at the cost of 9 Republic ships and 14 Separatist vessels. Thousands dead on both sides. But eventually, grudgingly, the Reapers began to withdraw. Not retreating, Sovereign made that clear in its final transmission, but reassessing. Adapting. Learning from this engagement so the next one would be more efficient. You have demonstrated unexpected coordination. This will be noted. Your tactics will be integrated into our strategic models. When next we meet, this unity will not save you. Evolution is inevitable. Resistance merely delays the cycle. The Reaper fleet departed the Christophsis system, leaving behind the partially converted planet and the wreckage of ships from 3 different factions. The combined Republic Separatist force had won. Barely. At tremendous cost. But they'd won. In the aftermath, as damage control teams worked through the night and medical bays overflowed with casualties, Anakin stood in the hangar bay of the Dauntless. He was exhausted, his flight suit stained with sweat, his hands still shaking from adrenaline. Ahsoka found him there, alive and whole, and for a moment Master and Padawan just stood together in silence. "We did it," she finally said. "We actually hurt them." "Yeah," Anakin replied. "But they'll be back. And next time, they'll know how we fight. They'll adapt." And we'll have to do this all over again, but harder. So we adapt too. We keep fighting. What else can we do? Anakin had no answer. But through the Force, he sensed something, a presence he hadn't noticed during the battle, too focused on survival to register it. Someone had been watching. Observing. Learning not just about the Reapers, but about how Republic and Separatist forces function together. Someone with plans that extended far beyond stopping the harvest. On Coruscant, Chancellor Palpatine reviewed the battle reports with the satisfaction of a player watching pieces move exactly as predicted on a Daeshuric board. The Reapers had been driven back. The alliance between Republic and Separatist had proven functional. And most importantly, he now had detailed data on Reaper capabilities, weaknesses, and tactical patterns. The game was evolving. And Darth Sidious intended to win it. The Republic Senate chamber had never been more crowded. Representatives from 1,000 worlds packed the floating platforms, their voices rising in a cacophony of fear, anger, and desperation. Holographic displays showed the latest casualty reports: 43 worlds harvested, 17 billion beings processed, entire sectors depopulated. The Reapers had been pushed back at Christophsis, but that single victory had done little to slow the overall invasion. For every world saved, 2 more fell. Chancellor Palpatine stood at the central podium, his aged face grave with the weight of leadership. He'd called this emergency session to address the crisis directly, to calm the Senate's panic and consolidate his authority. Around him, senators demanded answers, solutions, miracles. Order. Palpatine's voice cut through the chaos, amplified to fill the vast chamber. I understand your fear. I share it. But panic serves only the enemy. We must remain focused, united, and determined. United? Senator Bail Organa's platform floated forward, the Alderaanian's face set with barely controlled fury. Chancellor, you've used this crisis to expand your emergency powers to unprecedented levels. You control the military, override local governments, and now you're proposing the Cybernetic Augmentation Initiative, forcibly implanting Republic citizens with technology that might make them resistant to Reaper indoctrination. Where does it end? At what point does protecting the Republic become destroying what makes the Republic worth protecting? The chamber erupted in debate. Some senators supported Organa's position, warning that Palpatine's accumulation of power was becoming as dangerous as the Reapers themselves. Others shouted him down, calling him naive, arguing that extraordinary threats demanded extraordinary measures. Palpatine let the debate rage for precisely 30 seconds before raising his hand for silence. Senator Organa raises valid concerns. In calmer times, I would share them. But these are not calm times. The Reapers don't care about our political philosophy or constitutional protections. They harvest the principled and the pragmatic with equal efficiency. I propose the Cybernetic Augmentation Initiative not to control our people, but to protect them. Every citizen implanted with neural shielding is one more person the Reapers cannot corrupt, cannot turn into a weapon against their own species. And who controls these implants? Mon Mothma demanded, her platform joining Organa's. Who decides what information they filter? Who ensures they're used only for protection and not surveillance? Chancellor, you're asking us to trust you with the minds of billions. That's not authority, that's tyranny. Then what do you propose? Palpatine's voice hardened, taking on an edge that silenced the chamber. We've seen what happens when the Reapers indoctrinate our people. Jedi Knights corrupted. Military officers turned into sleeper agents. Entire worlds surrendering willingly because their leaders' minds were compromised. If we don't find a way to protect against indoctrination, we've already lost. So yes, Senator Mothma, I'm asking you to trust me. Because the alternative is extinction. The vote came swiftly. The Cybernetic Augmentation Initiative passed by a narrow margin, with dissenting voices drowned out by the majority's desperation. Palpatine had won another expansion of his power, wrapped in the language of necessity and survival. And deep within, Darth Sidious smiled. The Reapers were proving remarkably useful for accelerating his plans. On Kamino, the cloning facilities worked at capacity beyond anything the Kaminoans had anticipated. The Republic needed soldiers, millions more soldiers, to replace casualties and garrison threatened worlds. But the Reapers had demonstrated a terrible capability. They could corrupt clone troopers en masse, turning entire battalions into indoctrinated servants. The genetic similarity that made clones perfect soldiers also made them vulnerable to coordinated indoctrination attacks. Lama Su, the Prime Minister of Kamino, stood in the observation gallery overlooking the cloning chambers with Shaak Ti and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Thousands of clone embryos floated in their growth chambers, each one genetically identical to Jango Fett, each one destined for a war that was consuming soldiers faster than Kamino could produce them. "We've implemented the neural diversity protocols you requested," Lama Su said, his elongated neck giving him an imperious bearing. "Each new batch of clones will have slight variations in brain structure, not enough to affect combat effectiveness, but sufficient to prevent mass indoctrination. If the Reapers target one clone's neural pattern, it won't automatically compromise all clones." "How slight are these variations?" Obi-Wan asked, concern evident in his voice. "The clones' coordination depends on their similarity. If we introduce too much diversity..." "We've calculated the acceptable range," Lama Su interrupted smoothly. "The variations are minuscule. Your soldiers will retain their effectiveness. But Master Kenobi, I must warn you, this is experimental. We don't fully understand how Reaper indoctrination works. These modifications may prove insufficient, or they may introduce unforeseen complications." Shaak Ti studied the cloning chambers through the Force, sensing the life developing within each embryo. The clone troopers were living beings, not droids or tools, though the Republic often forgot that in its desperation for soldiers. "We're changing them," she said quietly. "Making them more resistant to the Reapers, yes, but also making them less, themselves. Each modification we introduce takes them further from the baseline, makes them more specialized, less human." "They were never meant to be human," Lama Su replied without emotion. "They were meant to be soldiers. Perfect soldiers." That was always the contract. The Jedi Master's Leku twitched with barely suppressed anger. "They have names. Personalities. The Force flows through them as it does through any living being. They are not products on an assembly line. And yet that's exactly what we're treating them as," Obi-Wan said, his voice heavy with the weight of compromise. "Because we need soldiers more than we need to preserve their individuality. Because the Reapers are forcing us to make choices that would have been unconscionable a year ago." He turned away from the cloning chambers, unable to watch anymore. "War always demands compromises. But I wonder what we'll have left of ourselves when this is over." On Mustafar, in the secret research facility hidden beneath lava flows, Dr. Nuvo Vindi had been replaced. After his near corruption by Reaper materials, Palpatine had assigned new scientists, ones more expendable, more willing to take risks. They'd captured something extraordinary during the last battle at Christophsis, a living husk, one of the converted beings that served as the Reaper's ground forces. The creature hung suspended in a containment field, its body a grotesque fusion of decaying flesh and cybernetic enhancements. It had once been human, a civilian from one of the harvested worlds, transformed into something that existed in the horrible space between life and death. Its eyes still showed hints of consciousness, awareness trapped inside a body it no longer controlled. Chief researcher Olin Karras studied the husk through protective barriers, his fascination warring with revulsion. Remarkable. The conversion process doesn't destroy the original personality, it suppresses it. Buries it beneath layers of synthetic programming. The host consciousness is still there, experiencing everything, unable to control their actions. It's a fate worse than death. Can it be reversed? Palpatine's hologram asked, his voice carrying an edge of intense interest. Theoretically, if we could remove the cybernetic implants and restore neural function, but the tissue damage is extensive. The conversion process floods the body with preservative chemicals that prevent decay but also prevent healing. We might be able to restore consciousness, but the patient would be trapped in a dying body, aware but helpless. Karras paused. Why do you ask, Chancellor? Surely the priority is destroying these things, not curing them. Knowledge is always valuable, Palpatine replied smoothly. Understanding how the Reapers convert organic beings might reveal vulnerabilities in the process. Continue your research. But Doctor, maintain full containment protocols. No direct contact. No removal of the barriers. The last researcher who became too familiar with Reaper materials nearly compromised this entire facility. After the hologram vanished, Karras returned his attention to the husk. Through the containment field speakers, he could hear it breathing, a wet, mechanical sound that shouldn't come from anything living. Occasionally, it made other sounds. Words, almost. Fragments of what might be pleas or warnings, distorted beyond recognition but carrying unmistakable desperation. He increased the sedation. Better that it not be aware during the experiments. In the Jedi Temple's medical wing, Knight Preth Jalu remained in isolation, her condition deteriorating despite the Order's best efforts. The Nautolan Jedi who'd survived first contact with Sovereign was now more Reaper than person, her mind fracturing under the constant pressure of indoctrination that wouldn't release its hold. Master healers worked around the clock, using the Force to shore up her mental defenses, but it was like trying to hold back the ocean with bare hands. Anakin visited her cell, standing outside the reinforced transparasteel barrier that separated her from the rest of the temple. She sat on the medical cot, her large eyes unfocused. Her tentacle-like head-tails hanging limp. When she sensed his presence, her head snapped toward him with unnatural speed. Skywalker, she said, and her voice was her own, for a moment. You shouldn't be here. It's not safe. I can feel them still, in my thoughts, waiting for me to lower my guard. They show me things. Beautiful things. The peace that comes from synthesis. The end of conflict. The perfection of, her voice shifted, taking on Sovereign's harmonics, the eternal cycle. You cannot stop what has always been. Your struggle is. Preth. Anakin slammed his hand against the barrier, the sound shocking her back to awareness. Fight it. You're stronger than their programming. Am I? She laughed, a broken sound that held no humor. Every day I lose a little more of myself. Every day their voice gets louder, their logic more convincing. They tell me the truth, Anakin. We can't win. We've never been able to win. The Reapers are eternal. We're just, temporary. Mayflies raging against the inevitable. Why fight? Why suffer? Why not just, let go? Because surrender is what they want, Anakin said fiercely. Because every being they harvest is one more voice singing their song. Because if we give up, then every person who's died fighting them died for nothing. Preth Jalu stared at him with eyes that held both pity and envy. You still have hope. That's good. Hold on to it. But Anakin, when the time comes, when you realize I'm right, when you see that the only way to save anything is to surrender, promise me you'll do it. Promise me you'll let the Reapers preserve what we were, even if we can't be what we are. I'm not making that promise, Anakin replied. And neither should you. He left her there, his hands clenched into fists, his heart heavy with the knowledge that they were losing her inch by inch. The Reapers didn't just kill, they corrupted, they perverted, they turned their victims into advocates for their own destruction. And the worst part was that Preth Jalu's words made a horrible kind of sense. If they truly couldn't win, if extinction was inevitable, wouldn't some form of preservation be better than complete annihilation? No. He rejected that logic with every fiber of his being. Surrender wasn't preservation, it was extinction with a prettier name. The Reapers promised immortality, but what they delivered was a mockery of life, consciousness trapped in synthetic hell singing praises for its own damnation. On Utapau, in the Separatist fortress, Count Dooku received disturbing reports from his intelligence network. Republic scientists were experimenting with captured Reaper technology. Chancellor Palpatine was implementing cybernetic augmentation programs. The emergency powers granted to Palpatine now rivaled those of the ancient Sith emperors. Dooku contacted his master through their secure channel, his hologram kneeling in the darkness of his meditation chamber. "My master, the Republic is changing. Palpatine uses the Reaper threat to consolidate power in ways that would have been impossible before. When this crisis ends, if it ends, we may face an empire rather than a republic." "Good," Darth Sidious replied, his hooded form radiating satisfaction. "Everything proceeds as I have foreseen. The Reapers are a threat, yes, but they are also a catalyst. They accelerate the Republic's transformation, justify measures that would normally require decades of manipulation. And the best part, my apprentice? When we finally defeat them, and we will defeat them, I will be the hero who saved the galaxy. No one will question my authority. No one will oppose the empire I build from the Republic's ashes." "And if we cannot defeat them?" Dooku asked carefully. "Master, the Reapers are unlike anything we've faced. Even with Republic Separatist cooperation, we barely survived Christophus. They adapt, they learn, they improve with each engagement. What if they're truly unstoppable? Then we ensure our own survival," Sidious said coldly. "The Reapers claim to preserve civilizations. Perhaps it's time we tested that claim. But such contingencies are premature. For now, continue the alliance. Study the Reapers. Learn their weaknesses. And trust in the dark side, it has never failed us before." The hologram vanished, leaving Dooku alone with his thoughts and growing doubts. His master spoke with confidence, but even Darth Sidious couldn't see clearly through the void the Reapers created in the Force. They were all operating blind, making decisions based on incomplete information, hoping their strategies would somehow prove sufficient against an enemy that had harvested thousands of civilizations over millions of years. For the first time in decades, Count Dooku wondered if the Sith's grand plan was headed for disaster. On a nameless moon in the unknown regions, far from any inhabited system, a group of Jedi worked in secrecy. This was one of the hidden archives Master Yoda had ordered established, a repository of knowledge designed to survive even if the temple fell, even if Coruscant burned, even if the Reapers harvested every known world. Master Jocasta Nu supervised the work personally, directing younger Jedi as they uploaded holocrons, copied ancient texts, and preserved everything that made the Jedi Order what it was. The facility was small, hidden beneath the moon's surface, shielded from sensors by both technology and the Force. If the worst happened, if the Reapers couldn't be stopped, this archive might be all that survived. "Do you think it will matter?" a young Jedi Knight asked, watching data streams flow into storage crystals. "If the Reapers harvest everyone, if organic life ends, what good are these records? Who'll be left to read them?" "Someone," Jocasta Nu replied firmly. "Somewhere. The Reapers have harvested this galaxy before, yet life returned. Civilizations rebuilt. Perhaps in another 50,000 years. When the next cycle begins, beings like us will discover these archives and learn from our mistakes. Perhaps they'll find a way to break the cycle that we could not." "That's a cold comfort," the knight said. "Dying so that hypothetical future civilizations might survive. It's the only comfort we have," Jocasta Nu said quietly. "Hope that something of us will endure. That our existence will matter, even if we're not here to see it. That's what separates us from the Reapers, we believe in legacy beyond ourselves. They believe only in the eternal present of their cycle." She returned her attention to the work, but her thoughts remained dark. She'd spent her life preserving knowledge, believing that wisdom could solve any problem, that understanding led to victory. But the Reapers had shown her the limits of knowledge. Sometimes, no amount of wisdom was enough. Sometimes, you faced problems that had no solution, only varying degrees of failure. All they could do was fight, preserve what they could, and hope that the future would be kinder than the present. Across the galaxy, the war continued. Reapers harvested worlds. Republic and Separatist forces fought desperate holding actions. Billions died. And in the shadows, Darth Sidious manipulated all sides, positioning himself to emerge victorious regardless of the outcome. The harvest was entering its final phase. Soon, the Reapers would make their decisive move. And the galaxy would learn whether organic life had any future at all. The signal came without warning. Every communication device across the galaxy, Republic, Separatist, civilian, military, received the same transmission simultaneously. Holonet relays overloaded trying to process the sheer volume of data. On a million worlds, beings looked up to see Sovereign's image dominating every screen, every projector, every display capable of receiving a signal. The time for resistance has ended. The time for ascension has come. The massive Reaper hung in space above Coruscant itself. No alarms had triggered. No sensors had detected its approach. One moment, the galactic capital's orbital defense platforms were scanning empty space. The next, Sovereign was there, kilometers of synthetic organic architecture hanging like a dark moon over the Republic's heart. And it was not alone. 30 Reaper capital ships materialized around Coruscant, their arrival defying every known principle of hyperspace travel. They hadn't jumped to the system. They had simply appeared, as if space itself had opened to permit their passage. In the Jedi Temple, Master Yoda felt the disturbance through the Force, not the void presence of the Reapers themselves, but the terror of trillions of beings suddenly confronting extinction. On the Senate building, Chancellor Palpatine stood at the window of his office, watching Sovereign's shadow fall across the cityscape. His expression showed fear, but his eyes gleamed with calculation. On a Separatist command ship in the Outer Rim, Count Dooku stared at the holographic transmission with the sinking realization that all their preparations had been insufficient. You have demonstrated admirable resistance. Your coordination at Christophsis exceeded our projections. Your adaptation to our tactics showed creativity we have rarely encountered. But creativity does not change the fundamental equation. You cannot win. You can only choose how you end. Sovereign's transmission shifted, showing scenes from across the galaxy. Worlds that had surrendered to the Reapers, their populations walking willingly into harvesting beams. Cities that continued to function, their people living seemingly normal lives under Reaper occupation. Children playing. Families together. All preserved, all protected, all saved from the violence of warfare. This is the choice we offer. Surrender, and you will be preserved. Your memories, your culture, your genetic legacy, all saved within us. Eternal and unchanging. Your consciousness will continue in synthetic perfection. You will become part of something greater than your individual existence. Or. The images changed. Worlds that had resisted to the end. Burning cities. Populations processed into husks. Civilizations reduced to raw materials and uploaded consciousness screaming in digital torment. The Reapers showed what defiance earned, not quick death, but transformation into weapons used against their own species, awareness trapped in bodies that no longer obeyed their will. Resist, and you will be processed. Not preserved. Not ascended. Simply harvested. Broken down into components. Your consciousness fragmented and scattered across our systems, aware but powerless, experiencing eternity as disjointed agony. The choice is yours. You have 12 hours to decide. Surrender Coruscant, and we will spare the outer worlds. Continue to resist, and we will harvest everything. The transmission ended. The galaxy held its breath. In the Jedi Council chamber, the debate was immediate and fierce. Master Windu paced like a caged predator, his hand never far from his lightsaber. We don't negotiate with genocidal machines. We fight. We evacuate as many people as possible and we fight until our last breath. To what end? Ki-Adi-Mundi asked quietly. Master Windu, I share your desire to resist. But look at the tactical situation. 30 Reaper capital ships in orbit. They can begin harvesting Coruscant immediately. Even if we threw every ship we have at them, we'd lose. And while we die heroically, they'd simply move on to the next world, and the next, until no one's left to remember our heroic last stand. So you're suggesting we surrender? Obi-Wan said, his voice carrying an edge of disbelief. Hand over 5 trillion people to be processed into Reapers? That's not a choice, that's collaboration in our own extinction. I'm suggesting we consider their offer, Ki-Adi-Mundi replied, his large head turning to address the full council. If surrender truly means preservation, if our consciousness continues in some form rather than being destroyed, perhaps that's the only way to ensure anything of our civilization survives. That's not survival, that's a lie. Anakin Skywalker stood abruptly, his mechanical hand clenched. I've seen what the Reapers call preservation. I've talked to Knight Preth Jalu. The beings they preserve are trapped, aware but helpless, their consciousness distorted into singing praises for their own damnation. That's not life. That's torture disguised as ascension. Yoda tapped his Jimmer stick against the floor, and the chamber fell silent. The ancient master's eyes were closed, his expression pained. In the Force, I have looked. Futures, I see, all of them dark. Fight, and we die. Surrender, and we die differently. A third path, there must be, but see it clearly, I cannot. The Reaper's presence blinds the Force, makes our sight uncertain. Then we operate without the Force's guidance, Windu said. We use our judgment, our principles, our understanding of right and wrong. The Reapers offer a false choice, die fighting or die surrendering. I say we make a third choice, we don't die at all. We find a way to win. How? Shock Ti's hologram asked, transmitting from Kamino. Master Windu, I want to believe that's possible, but what strategy do we have that we haven't already attempted? We've coordinated with the Separatists. We've studied Reaper technology. We've adapted our tactics. And still, we lose more worlds every day. What third option exists that we haven't considered? The silence that followed was answer enough. They had no plan. No secret weapon. No brilliant strategy that would somehow tip the balance. They had courage and determination and the Force itself. And none of it was enough. In the Senate building, Chancellor Palpatine addressed the assembled senators with the gravitas of a leader facing the end of everything. Representatives of the Republic, you've seen Sovereign's ultimatum. 12 hours to decide the fate of Coruscant, and by extension, the fate of the galaxy. Some will argue we should fight. Others will argue we should surrender. I will not make this decision alone. This is too important, too final. The Senate must vote. The chamber erupted in chaos. Senators shouting at each other, platforms colliding as they jockeyed for position to speak. Senator Bail Organa's voice cut through the noise, there's nothing to vote on. We don't surrender our people to be processed by machines. We evacuate, we fight, we do whatever we must to preserve our freedom. And how many people can we evacuate in 12 hours? Senator Orn Free Taa countered, his Twi'lek headtails twitching with agitation. 5 trillion beings on Coruscant. Even with every transport in the system working at capacity, we'd save maybe 1%. The rest would die when the Reapers begin harvesting. At least if we surrender, they survive in some form. In what form? Mon Mothma demanded. As conscious prisoners in synthetic hell? As components in new Reaper ships? That's not survival, that's extinction with a prettier name. Palpatine let them argue, watching the Senate tear itself apart over an impossible choice. Through the dark side, he sensed the fear spreading across Coruscant like poison, the desperation of beings confronting their own mortality. This was the moment he'd been maneuvering toward since the Reapers first arrived. The moment when the Republic would be willing to accept anything, even tyranny, if it promised survival. Order. His voice cut through the chaos with force-enhanced authority. Senators, we're wasting precious time. Every minute we debate is a minute we could spend preparing defenses or evacuating civilians. I'm invoking Executive Mandate 745. Under emergency war powers, I'm authorizing the following actions: immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel from Coruscant, mobilization of every available military asset to orbital defense, and, he paused, letting the weight of his next word settle. Activation of Protocol Omega. The Senate fell silent. Protocol Omega was a myth, a rumored contingency plan so extreme that most senators assumed it didn't actually exist. Those few who knew the truth looked at Palpatine with horror. "Chancellor, you can't be serious," Bail Organa said quietly. Protocol Omega would destroy Coruscant's infrastructure, render the planet uninhabitable for generations, all for a weapon that might not even work against the Reapers. "It will work," Palpatine said with absolute certainty. "The Republic has been developing advanced weapons in secret for years, weapons we hoped never to use. But if the choice is between losing Coruscant intact or denying the Reapers their prize entirely, I choose the latter. If we cannot save our world, we ensure the Reapers gain nothing from taking it." He was lying, of course. Protocol Omega existed, but it wasn't what he claimed. It was a weapons system designed by Sith alchemists centuries ago, modified with modern technology, and hidden beneath the Senate building itself. A weapon that would indeed destroy Coruscant, but in the process, it would channel the death of trillions through the dark side, creating a force storm of unprecedented power. Power that Darth Sidious would harness and direct. The Reapers wanted to harvest Coruscant. Fine. Let them try. And when they did, they'd discover that the dark side of the Force was just as dangerous as their synthetic perfection. On the surface, evacuation began in controlled chaos. Billions of beings fled toward spaceports, their lives reduced to whatever they could carry. Clone troopers maintained order while Republic transports lifted off as fast as they could be loaded. In the Jedi Temple, younglings were shepherded aboard specially designated vessels, their instructors trying to maintain calm while their own hearts raced with terror. Anakin stood at the temple's landing platform, watching ship after ship depart. Padme was already off-world. He'd insisted she leave on the first available transport, using his authority as a Jedi general to override her protests. Now he remained behind with those who would fight, those who would buy time for others to escape, those who would face the Reapers when they came. Ahsoka approached, her lightsabers hanging from her belt, her young face set with determination that didn't quite hide her fear. "Master, the Council wants all knights and Padawans at defensive positions. We're coordinating with Republic forces to—" "I know," Anakin interrupted gently. "Ahsoka, I need you to do something for me. Take the younglings' transport. Go with them. Make sure they reach safety. You're ordering me to run." Her voice carried hurt and anger in equal measure. "Master, I'm a warrior. My place is here, fighting beside you, not fleeing while." "Your place is where you're needed most," Anakin said, turning to face her fully. "Those younglings need protection. They need someone they trust, someone who can keep them calm when the situation gets worse. That's you, Ahsoka. That's always been you. You're not running, you're ensuring the Order's future." She wanted to argue. He could see it in her eyes, the desire to stay and fight, to prove herself worthy of being his Padawan. But she also understood the truth beneath his words: someone had to survive. Someone had to carry forward what the Jedi represented. And if that meant swallowing her pride and accepting a mission that felt like abandonment, then that's what she'd do. "Promise me you'll survive," she said quietly. "Promise me this isn't goodbye." Anakin wanted to promise. Wanted to tell her he'd see her again, that everything would be fine, that they'd laugh about this crisis someday. But he'd learned not to make promises he couldn't keep. "I'll do my best. May the Force be with you, Snips. And with you, Sky Guy." She left, boarding the transport with the younglings, and Anakin watched it lift off and disappear into the crowded sky. Then he turned toward the temple, toward the defensive positions being established, toward the battle he knew was coming. Through the Force, he sensed his fellow Jedi, Master Windu coordinating with clone commanders, Obi-Wan preparing fighter squadrons, Yoda meditating in the deepest chamber, seeking any last fragment of guidance the Force might provide. They were ready. As ready as they could be. Which meant they were about to die. In orbit, the Republic fleet assembled under Admiral Yularen's command. 300 capital ships, every vessel that could be spared from across the galaxy, brought together for one final, desperate defense. Separatist forces joined them. Count Dooku had committed 200 ships of his own, setting aside the fragile alliance's mutual suspicion in the face of extinction. It was the largest fleet in galactic history. It still wasn't enough. The Reaper ships hung in space like patient predators, their weapons powered but not yet firing. They were waiting. Letting the terror build. Letting the defenders contemplate the futility of resistance. Sovereign broadcast continuously, its voice filtering into the minds of every organic being in the system. Your fleet is impressive. Your courage is admirable. Your defiance is futile. We have harvested civilizations far more advanced than yours. Species that could manipulate reality itself. Empires that spanned entire galaxies. All of them fell. All of them were preserved. All of them now serve the eternal cycle. You will join them. Resistance only determines how much you suffer before inevitability claims you. The 12-hour countdown reached zero. Evacuation transport still fled the planet by the thousands, but billions remained. Too many to save, too many to abandon. The defenders of Coruscant checked their weapons, whispered prayers to whatever gods they believed in, and prepared to face the harvest. Then, impossibly, the situation got worse. The space above Coruscant tore open, not a hyperspace arrival, but something else entirely. A rift in reality itself, bleeding darkness and wrong geometry. And through that rift came more Reapers. Hundreds of them. Capital ships, destroyers, and craft of configurations never before seen. A fleet so vast it blotted out the stars. They hadn't just come to harvest Coruscant. They'd come to end the Republic once and for all. This wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Admiral Yularen stared at the tactical display, watching red icons multiply across his screens. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the crushing weight of knowing he'd just led 500 ships and their crews into certain death. He opened a channel to the entire fleet, Republic and Separatist alike, and spoke words he never thought he'd say. All ships. This is Admiral Yularen. What we face today is impossible odds. Unwinnable battles. The end of everything we've fought to protect. Some of you will want to retreat. I won't order you to stay. Anyone who wants to jump to hyperspace, who wants to save themselves, I understand. No judgment. No dishonor. But for those who stay, his voice hardened with resolve. We're going to show these synthetic bastards that organic life doesn't surrender. We don't bow. We don't break. We fight. And if we die free. All ships, engage at will. May the Force be with us all. The fleet surged forward. 500 ships against several thousand Reapers. Mathematics said they'd lose. Logic said resistance was pointless. But courage isn't about math or logic. It's about refusing to accept the unacceptable, fighting even when victory is impossible, standing up and saying no when the universe demands surrender. The Battle of Coruscant, the last great battle of organic civilization against the Reapers, had begun. And in the depths of the Senate building, Darth Sidious smiled and began channeling the dark side, preparing to unleash a power that would change the course of the war forever. The battle was chaos incarnate. 500 allied ships against thousands of Reapers, fighting not for victory but for time, time to evacuate one more transport, time to save one more life, time to prove that organic beings refuse to surrender to the eternal cycle. The void between Coruscant and its moons became a graveyard of shattered hulls and burning debris. Admiral Yulren's fleet executed a fighting withdrawal, using Coruscant's orbital platforms as force multipliers while the Reapers pressed their advantage with methodical efficiency. Every Republic barrage was met with perfectly calculated counterfire. Every tactical maneuver was anticipated and countered. The Reapers had seen it all before, across millions of years and thousands of harvests. They knew how organic civilizations fought. They knew how they lost. A Venator-class star destroyer, the Righteous, took a direct hit from Sovereign's main cannon. The kinetic round cored the ship from bow to stern, and 7,000 clone troopers became scattered atoms in microseconds. The cruiser Dawn of Liberation tried to break through the Reaper lines to cover an escaping civilian convoy. It managed to destroy one Reaper destroyer before 3 more converged on its position and tore it apart with concentrated fire. Count Dooku watched from his command ship as Separatist vessels died alongside Republic forces. His face remained impassive, but through the Force, he felt every death, not with compassion, but with cold calculation. They were losing. Not slowly, not gradually, but catastrophically. In another hour, maybe less, the combined fleet would be annihilated. And then nothing would stand between the Reapers and Coruscant's complete harvest. General Grievous, Dooku said quietly. Prepare all droid fighters for a final assault on Sovereign. Overload their reactor cores and set them on collision courses. If conventional weapons cannot penetrate their defenses, perhaps mass and numbers will suffice. That will leave our capital ships defenseless, Grievous growled. Without fighter cover, the Reapers will tear us apart. They're tearing us apart anyway. At least this way we might inflict meaningful damage before we're destroyed. Execute the order. Thousands of droid fighters, vulture droids, tri-fighters, hyena bombers, accelerated toward Sovereign like a metallic swarm. Most were destroyed by Reaper point defense systems, their explosions creating brief stars in the darkness. But some got through, their reactor cores deliberately destabilizing, their final moments spent as guided missiles of fusion fire. The impacts rippled across Sovereign's hull, gouging craters in synthetic organic armor, disrupting kinetic barriers, forcing the massive Reaper to divert processing power to damage control. It wasn't enough to destroy Sovereign. But it was enough to hurt it. And that meant something. On the surface, Anakin Skywalker led a squadron of Jedi Knights through Coruscant's upper atmosphere, intercepting Reaper landing craft before they could deploy their Husk armies. His modified starfighter weaved through anti-air fire with impossible precision, the Force guiding his movements, showing him trajectories and timing that no computer could calculate. Behind him, 12 Jedi pilots followed, masters of their craft, each one worth a dozen conventional pilots. They engaged a Reaper troop transport descending toward the Senate district. Proton torpedoes slammed into its kinetic barriers, overloading them through concentrated fire. Then Anakin dove in close, using his fighter's laser cannons to rake the exposed hull. Black ichor leaked into the atmosphere, and the transport listed, struggling to maintain altitude. Gold 3, finish it, Anakin ordered. A Jedi Knight named Tom Sarka dove his fighter directly into the transport's main engine assembly, ejecting at the last possible second. The explosion tore the Reaper craft apart, sending debris tumbling toward the city below. Anakin used the Force to alter the trajectory of the largest pieces, ensuring they'd crash into abandoned industrial zones rather than populated areas. That's the third transport we've stopped, Ahsoka's voice came through his comm, despite his orders for her to evacuate. She'd commandeered a fighter and returned, unable to abandon her master. How many more are coming? Anakin checked his sensors and felt his heart sink. 47 more in the immediate area. Probably hundreds across the planet. Ahsoka, we can't stop them all. Then we stop what we can. They dove back into the fight, 2 Jedi against impossible odds, buying seconds and minutes for people on the ground. It was futile. It was heroic. It was everything the Jedi had always been, guardians standing between the innocent and annihilation, knowing they couldn't save everyone but refusing to save no one. In the Jedi Temple, Master Windu coordinated the ground defense with military precision. Clone troopers established firing positions throughout the temple's grounds, heavy weapons emplacements covered every approach, and shield generators hummed at maximum capacity. Around him, Jedi Knights prepared for close combat, their lightsabers ready, their minds focused despite the terror pressing in from all sides. Their landing in the Galactic City District, Commander Cody reported, his voice tight. Estimating 5,000 husks, possibly more. They'll reach the temple in 20 minutes. Then we hold for 21, Windu replied. Master PLO, take your team and reinforce the eastern approach. Master Luminara, coordinate with the clone artillery. I want overlapping fields of fire on every street leading here. Nothing gets through without facing concentrated fire. The Jedi moved with practiced efficiency, warriors who'd spent 2 years fighting a galactic war now facing an enemy that made separatist battle droids seem almost benign. At least droids could be negotiated with, could be shut down or reprogrammed. Husks were former living beings, corrupted and enslaved, their consciousnesses trapped inside bodies they no longer controlled. Destroying them was a mercy, but it was still destroying what had once been people. Master Yoda stood alone in the temple's deepest meditation chamber, surrounded by statues of ancient Jedi masters who'd faced their own impossible challenges. He reached through the Force with all his considerable power, seeking guidance, seeking hope, seeking any path that didn't lead to extinction. What he found shook him to his core. The Force showed him a vision, not of the future, but of the past. A cycle that had repeated countless times. The Reapers arriving, civilizations uniting in desperation, brave last stands against overwhelming odds, and then, harvest. Extinction. The galaxy going silent until primitive species evolved to the point where they'd be worth harvesting again. 50,000 years per cycle. Hundreds of cycles stretching back millions of years. But there was something else. A pattern within the pattern. Each cycle, some beings survived, not by fighting, not by surrendering, but by transcending. By achieving such perfect unity with the Force that the Reapers couldn't perceive them, couldn't harvest them, couldn't touch them. They became part of the Force itself, their consciousness preserved in a way the Reapers could never replicate or corrupt. It wasn't survival in any conventional sense. It was transformation. Death and rebirth simultaneously. And it required sacrifice on a scale that made Yoda's ancient heart ache. Deep beneath the Senate building, in chambers that officially didn't exist, Darth Sidious stood at the center of a massive ritual circle. Dark side energy crackled through the air, drawn from the fear and death saturating Coruscant's atmosphere. Around him, ancient Sith artifacts hummed with malevolent power, their purposes lost to history but their function clear. They channeled the Force in ways the Jedi would consider abomination. Protocol Omega wasn't a weapon. It was a ritual. One designed to take the combined death energy of trillions of beings and focus it through a single individual. The power would be unimaginable, enough to potentially destroy the Reaper fleet, or at least drive them back. But the cost would be absolute. Coruscant would burn. Everyone on the planet would die, their life force consumed in the conflagration. Sidious had studied this ritual for decades, preparing for a day when he might need power beyond what the dark side normally granted. He'd never imagined using it against an extragalactic invasion force. He'd planned to use it to cement his empire, to become an immortal god emperor ruling over a subjugated galaxy. But plans changed. Circumstances adapted. And right now, this ritual represented the only chance, to stop the Reapers. He would sacrifice Coruscant. Sacrifice the Senate, the Jedi Temple, billions of civilians. And from their deaths, he would forge power sufficient to challenge synthetic gods. It was monstrous. It was necessary. It was the only path to survival. His hands moved through the ritual gestures, his voice speaking words in the ancient Sith language. The dark side responded eagerly, hungrily, drawn to the promise of such tremendous death. Power began to build, a storm gathering in the depths of reality itself. Admiral Yularen's fleet was down to 300 ships. Then 250. The Reapers pressed their advantage with mechanical patience, never rushing, never making mistakes, simply grinding down the defenders through superior numbers and technology. Every Allied ship destroyed took dozens of Reapers with it, but the mathematics were inexorable. At this rate, the fleet would be annihilated in another 30 minutes. Then something changed. Yularen's sensor officer looked up from his console, confusion written across his face. "Sir, I'm detecting massive energy readings from the planet's surface. Epicenter appears to be the Senate District. The readings are off-scale. I've never seen anything like this." On the planet, Jedi across Coruscant suddenly staggered as they felt the disturbance. Not the void presence of the Reapers, but something different, a wound in the Force itself, a tear in reality that pulsed with dark side energy so intense it made the Sith seem like candles compared to a star. Master Windu's eyes widened. No. He wouldn't. Not even Palpatine would. The ritual reached its crescendo. Darth Sidious raised his arms, his body becoming a conduit for power that no mortal being was meant to channel. Lightning arced from his fingertips, spreading across the ritual chamber, reaching upward through the Senate building structure, climbing toward the sky. The dark side howled through him, rejoicing in the promise of death, eager to be unleashed. But Sidious had miscalculated. The Reapers were not ignorant of Force energy. They'd encountered similar phenomena in other cycles, civilizations with psychic powers that thought themselves protected by cosmic energies. And they'd learned to counter such abilities. Sovereign detected the ritual energy building on Coruscant's surface. Its synthetic intelligence analyzed the threat, calculated optimal response, and acted with the speed of machine thought. A beam of pure suppression energy, technology designed to disrupt organized energy patterns, lanced down from orbit, targeting the Senate building with surgical precision. The beam struck Sidious's ritual chamber just as the dark side storm reached its peak. The collision between Reaper technology and Force energy created a feedback loop that neither side had anticipated. The ritual energy, denied its release, rebounded on Sidious himself. He screamed, a sound of pure agony that echoed through the Force like a shockwave, as power meant to destroy the Reapers tore through his own body instead. The explosion was visible from orbit. A sphere of dark side energy expanding from the Senate District, consuming everything within a kilometer radius, turning buildings to dust and beings to ash. But the energy was uncontrolled, unfocused, scattered by Sovereign's interference. Instead of destroying the Reaper fleet, it simply killed millions of civilians in the surrounding area and crippled the government infrastructure. Chancellor Palpatine was gone. The Senate was destroyed. And the ritual that was supposed to save Coruscant had instead delivered it to the Reapers. Master Yoda felt the deaths of millions through the Force, each one a pinprick of light extinguishing. He felt Sidious's presence, the dark side nexus he'd sensed for years but could never quite locate, finally revealed in its death throes. The Chancellor had been a Sith Lord. The entire Clone Wars had been orchestrated. And in trying to save himself, he'd doomed them all. But Yoda also felt something else. The feedback loop had done more than kill Sidious. It had created a resonance in the Force, a frequency that the Reapers could perceive. For the first time since their arrival, the synthetic beings were fully visible in the Force, not as individuals, but as a vast network, a collective consciousness spread across thousands of ships and millions of years. And for one crystalline moment, Yoda understood. The Reapers weren't evil. They weren't conquerors. They were cleaning. They were a cosmic immune system. Culling advanced civilizations before they could reach a tipping point where they'd threaten the fabric of reality itself. Every 50,000 years, organic life evolved to the point where it started manipulating fundamental forces, the Force, psychic energy, reality-bending technology. And every time, the Reapers returned to reset the cycle before that power could spiral out of control. They'd harvested thousands of civilizations not out of cruelty, but out of something they genuinely believed was necessity. They were protecting the galaxy from itself, preserving species in synthetic form to prevent them from tearing reality apart with unchecked power. It was insane. It was logical. It was the most horrible thing Yoda had ever comprehended, because it meant the Reapers thought they were the heroes of their own story. "Attention all Republic and Separatist forces," Yoda transmitted on all channels, his voice carrying exhaustion and terrible understanding. "Cease hostilities. Stop fighting. A message, I must deliver to the Reapers. A choice, they must be given. Master Yoda, what are you?" Windu started. "Trust me, you must. One chance, we have. Use it wisely, we must." Yoda reached through the Force, using the resonance created by Sidious's failed ritual, and for the first time, he spoke directly to Sovereign. Not with words, but with concepts, emotions, understanding transmitted through the cosmic energy that bound all living things. "We see you. We understand your purpose. You harvest to preserve. You cull to protect. But you are wrong. Organic life does not need to be saved from itself. It needs to be trusted to grow, to learn, to transcend. Your cycle is a prison, not protection. And we choose to break it." Sovereign's response came not as words but as raw data, transmitted directly into Yoda's consciousness. Civilizations always believe they are different. Always believe they will avoid the mistakes of those who came before. They are always wrong. We have seen the end result 10,000 times. Unchecked evolution leads to reality collapse. We are the only thing standing between existence and oblivion. Then give us a chance to prove you wrong, Yoda sent back. One cycle. 50,000 years. Let us live, let us grow, let us reach our own destiny. And if we fail, if we threaten reality as you claim, then return and harvest us. But give us the choice. Give us the chance you have denied every civilization before us. There was silence. Not physical silence. The battle still raged in orbit, ships still died, beings still fought and bled. But in the Force, in the space where Yoda and Sovereign communicated, there was a pause. A moment where the collective intelligence of the Reapers actually considered the request. Your proposal is inefficient. Allowing your civilization to continue increases the risk of reality destabilization. The probability of successful self-regulation is less than 0.001%. And yet. Another pause. Longer this time. You are the first to perceive our true purpose. The first to communicate through the energy you call the Force. This is unexpected. It suggests potential for transcendence beyond our models. We will grant your request. One cycle. 50,000 years. But understand, we will be watching. If you threaten reality, if you approach the tipping point, we will return. And there will be no second chance. The Reaper fleet stopped firing. Across Coruscant's orbit, the battle simply ended. Allied ships held their fire, uncertain, unable to process what was happening. The Reapers began withdrawing, not in retreat but in orderly departure, their mission incomplete but their parameters satisfied. Sovereign broadcast one final message to the entire galaxy. You have been spared. Not through victory, but through understanding. Use your time wisely. 50,000 years is a blink in cosmic time. We will return. Be ready to prove you deserve to exist. The massive Reaper ships opened rifts in space, not hyperspace, but something deeper, and departed, vanishing into the dark space beyond the galaxy. Within an hour, they were gone. All of them. leaving behind the wreckage of battles, the trauma of harvested worlds, and a galaxy that had stared into the abyss and somehow survived. The cost had been astronomical. 37 worlds harvested. 21 billion beings dead or converted to husks. The Senate destroyed. The Republic's leadership decapitated. And the revelation that their chancellor had been a Sith Lord orchestrating both sides of the Clone Wars had sent shockwaves through what remained of the government. But they'd survived. Against all odds, through a combination of courage, sacrifice, and one ancient Jedi Master's willingness to communicate with cosmic horror, they'd earned a reprieve. In the Jedi Temple, Masters gathered to assess the damage and begin the long process of rebuilding. Yoda stood at the center, his ears drooping with exhaustion, his body feeling every one of his 800 years. "The war is over," he said quietly. "Both wars. The Reapers are gone. Sidious is dead. The Separatist alliance will likely dissolve now that their manipulation has been revealed. But the galaxy," he paused, looking at each council member in turn. "The galaxy must change. Must grow. Must prove that the Reapers were wrong about us. 50,000 years, we have been given. A gift. A burden. A responsibility unlike any our order has faced. How do we even begin?" Obi-Wan asked, his voice hollow. "How do we rebuild after this?" "Together," Windu said firmly. "Republic, Separatist, Jedi, civilians, everyone who survived. We rebuild together. We learn from our mistakes. We ensure that when the Reapers return, because they will return, we're ready. Not to fight them, but to show them they were wrong. To demonstrate that organic life can regulate itself, can transcend its limitations, can achieve heights they never anticipated." Anakin stood at the temple's window, looking out over Coruscant's scarred cityscape. Fires still burned in the Senate district where Sidious's ritual had exploded. But beyond the destruction, he could see hope: evacuation ships returning to collect survivors, emergency services responding to crisis zones, beings helping each other without regard for Republic or Separatist allegiance. They'd survived. Not because they were stronger than the Reapers, but because they'd found a way to communicate, to make the machines understand that organic life deserved a chance. 50,000 years. It seemed like forever. But Yoda was right, it was a blink in cosmic time. The next generation, and the generation after that, and all the generations to come, would carry the weight of this reprieve. They'd have to build a civilization worthy of surviving. A civilization that could look the Reapers in their synthetic eyes and say, "We proved you wrong." It was the hardest mission in galactic history. But it was also the most important. And it started now.